Chapter 2194. Nie Tian. Nie Tian isn't dead. Ouyang Chuan reacted in an instant and exclaimed. He was so excited that he was on the verge of losing his mind. At this moment, everyone else's faces stiffened as they stared dumbfoundedly at the cave where the voice came from. Was Nie Tian really not dead? Everyone looked like they were in a dream and their eyes were filled with disbelief. The sect master of Blue Dragon sect was a terrifying figure. Nie Tian was sent flying into the cave on the 5th floor after taking a direct hit from him. Even so, he was not dead. No one could believe that something like that had happened. Impossible. That's impossible. Sima Lianzhao's eyes widened and he screamed in a high-pitched voice. He had never expected that Nie Tian was still alive. In his opinion, Nie Tian was dead for sure after taking a direct hit from his blue dragon hand. However, that was not the case. Not only did Nie Tian make a sound, but he was also full of energy. His breathing was stable, and there were no signs of him being seriously injured. Old man, do you think that your palm strike is very powerful? At this moment, Nie Tian's voice resounded once more in the cave, and it seemed to be cold and mocking. Every single word was like a slap to Sima Lianzhao's face. Brat you! Sima Lianzhao's eyes were dark and the muscles on his old face were twitching. He was obviously furious. However, there was nothing he could do at the moment because he did not have the ability to enter the 5th floor. Nie Tian, my young friend, you're really not dead. This is great. Ouyang Chuan was so excited to hear Nie Tian's voice again that he was almost incoherent. When he saw Nie Tian being sent flying by Sima Lianzhao, his heart was heavy. Now that Nie Tian was still alive, it was like a life-saving straw had appeared again. How could he not be excited? Sect Master Ouyang, I'm slightly injured, but it's nothing serious. Please wait patiently outside. I'll come out very soon after I get what you want. Nie Tian's voice sounded, and he sounded very calm. Good. Good. I'll wait here and won't go anywhere. Ouyang Chuan repeatedly agreed, his face blooming like a chrysanthemum. Finally, he didn't forget to say, Thank you, little friend Nie Tian. Looking at Ouyang Chuan, Sima Lianzhao's face sank. He finally understood why Ouyang Chuan cared so much about Nie Tian. It turned out that Nie Tian had entered the cave to retrieve something for Ouyang Chuan. Smelly brat, I hope you can come out soon, because I, the sect master, will be waiting for you here. In the next moment, Sima Lianzhao said coldly with a dark expression. His eyes were cold, making one's heart palpitate. Old fart, just wait and see. Nie Tian's voice rang out from within the cave, carrying a strong sense of ridicule and provocation. Sima Lianzhao's face was so gloomy that it was almost dripping blood, but he could not do anything to Nie Tian. Ouyang Chuan gave Sima Lianzhao a cold stare, his figure hovering in midair, guarding the entrance of the cave, waiting for Nie Tian to come out. At that instant, the crowd's expressions changed. Their eyes flickered, as if they were anticipating something. Everyone could tell that Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan were both waiting for Nie Tian to come out. However, the two of them had completely different attitudes towards Nie Tian. Sima Lianzhao wanted to kill Nie Tian, while Ouyang Chuan was extremely respectful. Therefore, when Nie Tian came out, wouldn't the two sect masters be at odds with each other? Everyone was looking forward to the moment. The battle between the sect masters of Blue Dragon and the Wind God sect would be spectacular. At the same time, inside the cave, Nie Tian took a deep breath, and his face, which was as pale as a sheet of paper, slightly improved. The strength of this sect master of Blue Dragon is too terrifying. If it weren't for my martial flesh, I would be a corpse by now. Nie Tian let out a wry smile and said in a self-mocking tone. That moment just now was really very dangerous. Sima Lianzhao's palm strike was indeed terrifying. Luckily, Nie Tian reacted quickly, activating all his defenses at the most crucial moment. The purple lightning battle armor, the shield of the astral spirits, the 3 seals of the divine god of battle were activated at the same time, barely allowing Nye Tian to survive. One could not help but admit that Nye Tian's martial flesh was terrifyingly powerful. Otherwise, he would not be able to survive regardless of how many defenses he had. The 9 dragon veins, 800 billion star power, the princess's tear, and the primal chaos flame were all heaven-defying treasures that had greatly enhanced Nye Tian's martial body. That was why he had survived. Eyebrows furrowed, Nye Tian muttered, "Compared to the truly powerful experts, I'm still too weak." Sima Lianzhao's strength was not particularly powerful. He was on par with Nye Dao and the others at most, or even slightly weaker. He was nothing compared to a half-saint like Ming Jianyu. But even with that being the case, Sima Lianzhao's full-powered strike had almost killed Nye Tian. Nye Tian's true strength was only a peak over God after all. No matter how monstrous his talent was, his battle prowess was still limited. Afterwards, Nye Tian sat down with his legs crossed and began to slowly recover from his injuries. His injuries were not light, but they were not fatal. He could recover very quickly with the help of the earth vein source. Nye Tian was in no hurry. He knew that Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan would be waiting for him outside. He had spoken earlier to tell Ouyang Chuan that he was still alive. He wanted to use Ouyang Chuan to kill Sima Lianzhao. He had almost lost his life to Sima Lianzhao, so he obviously could not just let him leave like that. Around an hour later, Nye Tian stood up. His breathing was stable, and his complexion had completely recovered. Fusing with the earth vein source really does bring great benefits, Nye Tian murmured with a smile as he exhaled deeply. Great confidence filled his face. His injuries earlier were very heavy. Under normal circumstances, he would need several months to recover. However, with the earth vein source, he only needed an hour to make a full recovery. The 2 sect masters are still here. That's fantastic. Nye Tian glanced outside the cave. Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan were still there. It was as if the 2 of them hadn't moved at all, and were just standing there, waiting for Nye Tian. Afterwards, Nye Tian prepared to venture deeper into the cave. He needed to find the piece of rheumatism that Ouyang Chuan wanted, or the latter would never risk his life for him. This cave really is strange. There seems to be a profound power in the space. I can clearly sense it, but I can't grasp it. As he ventured deeper and deeper, Nye Tian sensed a strange power in the space around him. It was very profound. The more he tried to sense the power, the more he felt that it was erratic, as if it was playing hide and seek with him. Nye Tian, this is a very powerful saint energy. With your current strength, you still can't absorb it. At this moment, the fat cat's voice rang out. Chapter 2195. Imagem. Nye Tian's eyes lit up when he heard the fat cat's words. He nodded and walked forward. This was his first time entering the Thousand Demons cave. He didn't know what was inside, so he was very cautious. He kept the holographic divine runes on and paid attention to his surroundings. After a while, Nye Tian came to a cave. Nye Tian, it's here. The fat cat's voice sounded excited. Nye Tian nodded. He didn't dare to be careless. He carefully sensed his surroundings to make sure there were no abnormalities, then he carefully stepped into the cave. The moment he entered the cave, Nye Tian felt a wave of scorching air assaulting his face, causing his expression to change involuntarily. Only then did he realize that there was a lava lake in the cave. The lava lake wasn't big, but it was emitting an extremely hot aura. Crimson flames were rolling on the surface of the lake like a huge brazier. Is that all? Nye Tian looked around. Apart from the lava lake, there was nothing else in the cave. This made him feel very strange. Nye Tian, the thing you're looking for is in the lake. At this time, the fat cat's voice sounded. In the lake. Nye Tian heard the fat cat's words and his eyes trembled. He let out a strange cry and said, "Fat, are you saying that the jade of rheumatism is in this lava lake?" The fat cat nodded with a smile and said, I can sense that there is a crimson stone at the bottom of the lake. It should be the jade of rheumatism. This. Nietion's face stiffened. He frowned and said, Do I have to enter the lake? Of course. The fat cat laughed and said, Don't worry. With your martial body, this kind of flame can't hurt you at all. Sensing the aura of the lava lake, Nietion could not help but gasp and murmur, Fatty, are you sure this flame can't hurt me? I'm very sure. Don't worry and just enter the lake. Fat Cat said confidently. Her blue eyes were filled with smiles. All right. Nietion nodded. Then, with a firm look in his eyes, he stepped into the lake and landed in the middle of the lake. Plop. Just as he fell into the lake, a tragic howl was heard. Nietion felt the terrifying power of the flame invading his body. His entire body's skin actually melted in an instant. That kind of sudden sharp pain, even he couldn't bear it. Fat, what's going on? This kind of flame is so strong. It can melt my skin in an instant. Nietion cried out in pain. Nietion, I only said this kind of flame can't hurt you. But you will still feel a little pain. The fat cat laughed, as if she was taking pleasure in his misfortune. Previously, Nietion had endured the forbidden fire spell in the hands of the mysterious man. His martial body could even withstand the forbidden fire spell. Of course, the flame of the lava lake was not dangerous to him. However, this flame had a strange power. It could melt skin. Even Nietion couldn't stop this power. Nietion screamed and almost cursed. This was not a little pain at all. This was a great pain. Nietion, hurry up. The jade of rheumatism is at the bottom of the lake. Find it quickly and you can get rid of the pain quickly. The fat cat didn't care and said with a faint smile. Nietion's eyes flickered. He wanted to cry but no tears came out. He felt that all his skin had been melted. He estimated that he would only be left with his skeleton. Fortunately, he had the 9 dragon veins and the power of the stars in his body, which could slightly resist the power of the flame. Coupled with the recovery ability of the earth vein source, he could move freely. Then, Nietion didn't hesitate. He moved and dove into the depths of the lava lake. The lava lake wasn't big, but it was very deep. The deeper he went, the stronger the power of the flame. Nietion didn't move fast. It took him about half an hour to reach the bottom of the lake. The jade of rheumatism. The moment he landed, Nietion suddenly saw a crimson jade the size of a baby's fist not far away. His eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he couldn't help but scream. He was very sure that this jade was the jade of rheumatism that he was looking for. In the next moment, Nietion moved and prepared to take the jade of rheumatism. Stop! However, at that moment, Fat Cat screamed, her voice trembling. Nietion was shocked and his body froze. Boom! At that moment, the jade of rheumatism suddenly shook in a strange manner. Instantly, a crimson wave of flames surged and rushed straight towards Nietion. Nietion reacted immediately. His body suddenly rose, and he barely dodged the impact of the wave of flames. That was close. Taking a deep breath, Nietion still hadn't recovered from the shock. He asked, Fat, what's going on? It's the restriction of rheumatism. Fat Cat was also shocked. Her face was pale, but she calmed down and said, This is the restriction left by the person who preserved the jade of rheumatism to prevent outsiders from taking it away. The jade of rheumatism is the most precious treasure in the world. It's not something that can be taken away easily. Nietion shook his head and smiled. I was too careless. Ever since he entered the cave, he had been very careful. However, when he saw the jade of rheumatism, he was too excited and almost lost his life. Fortunately, Fat Cat was there. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Fat, can you break the restriction of rheumatism? Nietion asked after taking a deep breath. Give me some time. Fat Cat nodded. Then, she chuckled and said, The restriction of rheumatism is a good thing. When you get out of the cave, you'll need to rely on it to kill the sect master of Tsang Long. Fat, are you coming out? Nie Tian was stunned when he heard Fat Cat's words. He asked in surprise. It seemed that Fat Cat was going to come out of the origin fetus space. However, they were at the bottom of the lake. The power of fire was very strong. Even Nie Tian could barely withstand it. If Fat Cat came out, his fat would be gone in an instant. Nie Tian, release the chaotic flame. Fat Cat chuckled and said. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed. He immediately understood something and released the chaotic flame. A strange scene happened. As the chaotic flame spread, the power of fire around Nie Tian was forcefully pushed away. The chaotic flame formed a shield, and the power of fire couldn't get close to Nie Tian at all. Nie Tian was speechless. If he knew that the chaotic flame could block the power of fire, he wouldn't have to endure so much pain. Fat Cat chuckled and appeared directly. Young man, it's not a bad thing for you to endure a little pain. Nie Tian was speechless. It seemed that Fat Cat already knew that the chaotic flame could block the power of fire. It purposely made Nie Tian suffer. The chaotic flame is formed by the fusion of two supreme flames. It can suppress all power of fire. I'm too stupid. I didn't think of this. Nie Tian smiled bitterly. He wouldn't blame Fat Cat. He could only blame himself for being too stupid. Chapter 2196. The Fat Cat stared at the rheumatism jade for a few minutes. Its entire face was frozen. Nie Tian did not know what the Fat Cat was doing. He did not dare to disturb the latter and could only watch from the side. It is indeed a terrifying restrictive force. Very good. After a while, the Fat Cat finally reacted. It smiled and released colorful glaze runes from its body. The runes slowly surged in the air and enveloped the rheumatism jade. At that moment, Nie Tian finally saw that the surface of the rheumatism jade was enveloped by a very strange shield. Countless mysterious runes surged and released an extremely strange force. Nie Tian secretly used the holographic sacred sigil to sense the runes. He immediately felt a vast and boundless force. At that moment, he felt that it was no longer a piece of jade in front of him. Instead, it was a vast and boundless ocean. What a strange feeling! Nie Tian frowned and his expression slowly turned into one of shock. He did not expect such a powerful rune restriction to exist in this world. And at this moment, a strange scene happened. The glaze runes began to circulate wildly and absorbed the power of the rune restriction bit by bit. Seeing this, Nie Tian's eyes could not help but narrow. He was extremely shocked in his heart. Lil, Fatty is too abnormal. He can actually absorb such a powerful restrictive force. He did not expect the Fat Cat to become so strong. It did not break the restrictive force but directly absorbed it. Nie Tian, everything in this world has its own rules, Nie Tian said. At that moment, the Fat Cat saw the doubt in Nie Tian's mind. It smiled and said, the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, the power of the divine energy, the sacred energy, the power of the formation, the power of the restriction, the power of the seal, all of them are the same. As long as you can understand the rules, you will be able to control this power. As it spoke, the Fat Cat controlled the glaze runes and continuously absorbed the power of the rheumatism jade. Nie Tian was deeply shocked and nodded slightly. Although the Fat Cat made it sound easy, Nie Tian knew that it would be extremely difficult to achieve this. There were thousands of rules in the world, but those who could truly grasp them were few and far between. The reason why the Fat Cat knew so much was partly because of the nine-tailed chinchilla's special ability to sense the world, and partly because of the nine-tailed chinchilla's special inherited memories. Everything the Fat Cat knew was not learned by itself, but inherited from countless nine-tailed chinchilla ancestors. Needless to say, the nine-tailed chinchilla's inherited memories were indeed terrifying. After about an hour, the Fat Cat finally stopped what she was doing and retracted the glaze rune. Fatty, are you done? Nie Tian's eyes were hot, unable to conceal the excitement in his heart. The fat cat nodded and smiled. The rheumatism jade has basically been absorbed by me. You can do it now. As it spoke, it suddenly turned to look at its buttocks and chuckled. Fortunately, I grew a seventh tail. Otherwise, it would be impossible to absorb the rheumatism jade. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment. He looked over and realized that the fat cat had unknowingly grown a seventh tail. Back then, when Nie Tian brought the fat cat out of the glazed demon pagoda, the latter only had one tail. When the nine-tailed chinchilla was fully grown, it had 9 tails. The reason why the fat cat could grow so quickly was all thanks to the power of Nie Tian's celestial demon ocean. Do it. The fat cat glanced at Nie Tian and then moved back into the origin fetus space. Nie Tian nodded slightly and took a step forward. He was still a little worried and was very cautious. But this time, when he approached the rheumatism jade, he did not feel any impact. In the next instant, he placed his palm down and held the rheumatism jade in his hand. I finally got the rheumatism jade. Looking at the rheumatism jade in his hand, Nie Tian smiled. He was very happy. Everything was going very smoothly. Next, it was time to leave the cave. The process of getting the rheumatism jade seemed easy, but it was actually very dangerous. Without the fat cat, Nie Tian would not have been able to get the rheumatism jade. Nie Tian kept the rheumatism jade and immediately left the lava lake. He walked out of the cave and soon arrived at the entrance of the cave. At this time, Nie Tian saw that Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan were still standing in the air, not moving at all. Both of them were very patient. One wanted to kill Nie Tian, and the other needed Nie Tian to save his life. Ouyang Chuan, the flowing flame jade is your life-saving treasure. For this thing, you won't hesitate to fall out with Sima Lianzhao, right? Nie Tian swept his eyes over Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan, the corners of his mouth curling into a faint smile. He and Ouyang Chuan had a cooperative relationship, but it was only a cooperative relationship, nothing more. If Ouyang Chuan did not pay a price, Nie Tian would not hand over the rheumatism jade. To Nie Tian, Ouyang Chuan was not a good person. If not for Nie Tian's talent, Ouyang Chuan would not be so courteous to Nie Tian. He might even kill him with his own hand. Sect leader Ouyang, I've got the item you wanted. Nie Tian took a deep breath and shouted loudly, his voice resonating in the air. Nie Tian, my young friend. Ouyang Chuan's eyes trembled. He could only hear Nie Tian's voice, but he could not see the latter. Brat, you're finally coming out? At the same time, Sima Lianzhao laughed coldly and said in a deep voice, I'd like to see what kind of monster you are to be able to block my blue dragon palm. His voice was deep and murderous. Sima Lianzhao had been waiting impatiently. When the crowd heard Nie Tian's voice, their eyes lit up. They were also waiting for Nie Tian to appear. What they were curious about was whether Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan would fight to the death for Nie Tian. Sect leader Ouyang, I'm going out now. You don't want anything to happen to me, right? Nie Tian's voice was heard again, this time with a heavy sense of mockery. Nie Tian, my young friend, don't worry and come out. With me, Ouyang Chuan, here, I will not allow anyone to hurt you. Ouyang Chuan, of course, understood Nie Tian's meaning. He shouted loudly and locked his gaze on Sima Lianzhao. Ouyang Chuan, are you crazy? Sima Lianzhao could feel Ouyang Chuan's hostility. He frowned and said in a low voice, You really want to fight me for this kid? Sima Lianzhao, Nie Tian is my friend. I will not allow anyone to hurt him. Ouyang Chuan's eyes were dark and cold. Leave now and I will not stop you. If you dare to attack Nie Tian, don't blame me for being merciless. The cold voice was very decisive. Ouyang Chuan, it seems like you are determined to protect this kid. Sima Lianzhao's confused expression darkened as he responded, Do you really think I, Sima Lianzhao, am afraid of you? Since you want to fight, then I will fight with you. At this moment, Countless people were waiting to see how the Blue Dragon sect would survive in the Burial Cloud Mountain if Sima Lianzhao left. Most importantly, he felt threatened by Nie Tian. Chapter 2197. I'll fight with you. Sima Lianzhao's words made the onlookers tense up. It seemed that the sect masters of the Blue Dragon sect and the Wind Divine sect were really going to fight to the death. In the Burial Cloud Mountain Range, Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan were both peak overlords. Everyone was looking forward to their battle. At this time, Ouyang Yufei and Ling Yusong looked at Ouyang Chuan from afar. Their faces were tense and they were obviously very nervous. One was Ouyang Chuan's daughter, and the other was his disciple. Of course, they were worried about the latter's safety. Ouyang Chuan glanced at the cave and saw that Nie Tian showed no signs of coming out, so he said in a cold tone, Sima Lianzhao, make your move. Of course, he knew that Nie Tian was waiting for him to make his move. If he didn't kill Sima Lianzhao, Nie Tian wouldn't come out. It had to be said that Nie Tian's move was indeed vicious. He forced Ouyang Chuan and Sima Lianzhao to fight to the death. Ouyang Chuan was already on the verge of death. If he didn't make his move, he could only wait for death. If he made his move, he might be lucky enough to defeat Sima Lianzhao and survive. More importantly, Ouyang Chuan had other plans. If he could obtain the rheumatism jade, not only would he be able to get rid of the 7 evils in Chill, but he could also absorb the power inside the rheumatism jade and step into the semi-sage realm. Such a huge temptation was enough to make him fight to the death. Fine, as you wish. Sima Lianzhao sneered and the murderous intent in his eyes intensified. He suddenly moved and struck out with his palm. Boom! The void trembled and the shadow of a dragon claw appeared. It was huge and boundless, and like a rolling wave, it pressed down on Ouyang Chuan. Seeing this, Ouyang Chuan's eyes narrowed and he struck out with his palm as well. An illusory palm shadow appeared in the air. What a strong aura! When the crowd saw this, their eyes trembled and their hearts were filled with shock. The aura of a peak immortal state cultivator was indeed terrifying. Kaboom! The next moment, under the watchful eyes of countless people, the shadow of the dragon claw and the shadow of the void collided with a loud bang. The void suddenly trembled, and then endless wild waves surged from the center of the collision, rushing in all directions. The crowd was pushed back by the shockwave. On the ground, there were actually several terrifying ravines torn open, and the ground was set off in waves of gravel and dirt that were tens of meters high. Chi. Ear-piercing noises sounded out from the sky, and only after a long time did the violent airwaves dissipate. 2 silhouettes appeared in the sky, and they were Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan. The aura around the two of them surged as they stood there like 2 mountains. Ouyang Chuan, your strength seems to be weaker than I expected. Sima Lianzhao's lips twitched as he revealed a strange smile. It's enough to defeat you, Ouyang Chuan replied in a cold tone. However, a trace of panic flashed across his eyes. He had fought Sima Lianzhao head-on, and while it seemed like he wasn't at a disadvantage, he had paid a heavy price. The 7 evils in Chill in his body had been stimulated, and now it was slowly becoming violent. If the 7 evils in Chill grew stronger, even if Sima Lianzhao didn't attack, Ouyang Chuan's life would be in danger. With Sima Lianzhao's strength, he instantly sensed the 7 evils in Chill in Ouyang Chuan's body. This was something he hadn't expected. If he had known that Ouyang Chuan had an unmentionable injury, he would have attacked him long ago. The Blue Dragon sect and the Wind sect were both the top forces in the Burial Cloud Mountains. On the surface, the 2 sects maintained a relationship of equality, but in reality, they both had the ambition to destroy the other. However, the 2 sects' strength was similar, and they both feared each other, so they had always maintained a harmonious relationship. If Sima Lianzhao had known that Ouyang Chuan was just an embroidered pillow, he would have attacked the Wind sect long ago. Ouyang Chuan, you have a tough mouth, but unfortunately, you are not strong enough. Sima Lianzhao laughed wildly, and then directly attacked Ouyang Chuan with an even more violent palm. Boom! 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 In the sky there was a continuous violent sound. People could no longer see Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan, and could only see endless waves rolling in the sky. Bang! A moment later there was a muffled sound, and then a figure flew out, drawing a bloody trail in the air. Wind Sect Leader. The crowd's eyes widened, and they immediately recognized that the bloody figure was Ouyang Chuan. Ouyang Chuan barely stabilized his body, and his whole body was covered with blood, and there were several frightening wounds on his body. It was obvious that he was seriously injured. What? The onlookers all took in a long breath of cold air. They were all confused and shocked. In everyone's opinion, the Blue Dragon sect and the Wind sect were sects of the same level, so the strength of the two sect leaders should be about the same. But now, Ouyang Chuan was completely suppressed by Sima Lianzhao, and he couldn't even fight back. This didn't conform to the crowd's understanding. Ouyang Chuan's aura was very strong, and it was obvious that he was on par with Sima Lianzhao. Why was he losing in the fight? Little did they know that Ouyang Chuan was suppressed by the seven evils Yin Chill, so his aura was getting weaker and weaker. Ouyang Chuan wasn't defeated by Sima Lianzhao, but by the seven evils Yin Chill in his body. Father! Teacher! At this moment, Ouyang Yufei and Ling Yusong's voices sounded almost at the same time. Both of them were extremely nervous, especially Ouyang Yufei, whose eyes were already filled with tears. The person who had been beaten to a bloody pulp was her father. How could she not be sad to see her father being beaten up like this? But there was nothing she could do at this moment because she was too weak. Ha ha ha! In the sky, Sima Lianzhao laughed wildly, and he was extremely arrogant. Ouyang Chuan, you really gave me a big surprise. I really didn't expect the dignified Wind sect leader to be an embroidered pillow. You look good on the outside, but you're useless. To think that I, the sect master, had placed so much importance on you and treated you as a true opponent. Your strength is simply too disappointing. His arrogant voice was full of disdain and pride. Sima Lianzhao, you. Ouyang Chuan's eyes trembled, and he was about to speak, but he vomited a mouthful of blood. Actually, he wasn't seriously injured, but the seven evils Yin Chill in his body was too overbearing, and it almost froze all the meridians in his body. He was furious, and he was unwilling to accept this. If it wasn't for the seven evils Yin Chill, he wouldn't have been defeated so badly. Ouyang Chuan, accept your death obediently. In the next moment, Sima Lianzhao's face darkened, and he walked over step by step. With every step he took, the killing intent in his eyes intensified. Sima Lianzhao, don't you want to kill me first? But at this moment, a mocking voice sounded behind Sima Lianzhao, causing him to stop moving, and he suddenly turned around. Pfft! In the air, a figure walked out of the cave, and a pair of eyes stared at Sima Lianzhao indifferently. Brat, how dare you come out? Sima Lianzhao's eyes narrowed, and his killing intent grew. Chapter 2198. It's that guy. Nie Tian's sudden appearance caused everyone's eyes to widen as they cried out in alarm. No one had thought that Nie Tian would walk out of the cave at this moment. Ouyang Chuan had already lost and was about to die in Sima Lianzhao's hands. Wasn't Nie Tian digging his own grave by walking out at this moment? Nie Tian, my young friend, you. Ouyang Chuan frowned when he saw Nie Tian. He was so shocked that he didn't know what to say. He had thought that Nie Tian wouldn't come out after he was defeated by Sima Lianzhao. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that Nie Tian would walk out of the cave and challenge Sima Lianzhao. Young man, you've got guts. Sima Lianzhao stared at Nie Tian with a cold smile. I didn't expect you to have the guts to come out. I have to admit that I'm surprised by your guts. The cold voice was filled with a strong killing intent. Sima Lianzhao's eyes were extremely cold, and at the same time, there was an unconcealable shock in them. He had already sensed Nie Tian's body and found that Nie Tian's qi had completely recovered. He couldn't believe it. Just a few hours ago, Nietian had been hit by his palm. How strong was Nietian's martial body? You can't kill me. Why wouldn't I dare to come out? Nietian looked at Sima Lianzhao with a cold smile. You little brat, you. Sima Lianzhao frowned. He suddenly felt a lump in his throat and couldn't say a word. Nietian was obviously mocking him. He had failed to kill Ouyang Chuan with his palm. A faint smile appeared at the corner of Nietian's mouth as he glanced at Ouyang Chuan and said, Sect Master Ouyang, I've seen your sincerity. You've done well. Leave the rest to me. The indifferent voice wasn't loud, but the moment it landed, everyone's expression changed. Following which, the entire place fell into dead silence. Everyone's eyes were focused on Nietian, as if suspecting that they had heard wrongly. Nietian had just said that he would take care of the rest. What did that mean? Could it be that he was going to fight Sima Lianzhao? Most people could tell that Nietian was only a peak over god. How was it possible for him to fight Sima Lianzhao? Even the sect master of the Divine Wind sect had lost to Sima Lianzhao. Could an over-god defeat Sima Lianzhao? Brat, what did you just say? I didn't hear you clearly. Can you repeat yourself? Sima Lianzhao was stunned for a moment before he sneered and asked in a strange tone. I said, leave your life to me. Nietian's expression turned cold as he said word by word, Sima Lianzhao, do you understand now? Ha ha. Suddenly, Sima Lianzhao started laughing. It was as if he had gone mad. It was the funniest joke he had ever heard in his life. Wasn't it funny for an overgod to be so arrogant to this extent? In the next moment, the crowd returned to their senses and began to laugh. Is this kid an idiot? He's an overgod, yet he dares to challenge a peak overgod so arrogantly. Just how sick of living is he? I thought my ears were broken. This kid's just a joke. Silver Hair is quite the character. It's a pity that his brain is filled with paste. He's looking for death in such a strange way. The discussions of the crowd were getting more and more unpleasant. Nietian did not care at all. He directly took a step forward and stared at Sima Lianzhao strangely. He growled, Sima Lianzhao, I only need a single move to kill you. Sima Lianzhao's face immediately darkened when he heard Nietian's words. His aura erupted and he roared out, Brat, your joke ends here. Sima Lianzhao directly struck out with both hands. Immediately, boundless power gathered in the air, causing the space there to tighten. Roar. In the next moment, the shadow of a 10,000-meter-long azure dragon appeared. It raised its head to the sky and let out a furious roar that shook the heavens and earth. This is... Ouyang Chuan's eyes widened when he saw this. Two words appeared in his mind. Azure Dragon rages the heavens. The martial skill that Sima Lianzhao was using was the strongest of the Blue Dragon sect's three signature martial skills. Azure Dragon rages the heavens. Sima Lianzhao did not use this move when he fought Ouyang Chuan earlier. Now, he was actually using it on Nietian. It was clear how much he wanted to kill Nietian. Die! Sima Lianzhao let out a fierce roar as he summoned an Azure Dragon shadow, which surged towards Nietian, stirring up endless raging waves. The crowd's eyes widened. Their nerves were stretched to the limit. It was as if they could already see Nietian being killed in an instant. Good timing! Nietian showed no fear in the face of Sima Lianzhao's ultimate move. Instead, he had a playful look on his face. The corners of his mouth twitched as he said, Lil Fei, it's up to you now. No problem. I've been waiting for this moment. Fat Cat chuckled slyly. Boom! Like a raging sea, the illusory Azure Dragon came crashing down from the sky, and was about to slam into Nietian. In the nick of time, a strange scene occurred. All of a sudden, numerous magical symbols appeared around Nietian, which instantly enveloped his entire body. Next, let me see how strong these rheumatism restriction runes are. Fat Cat chuckled proudly. These mysterious runes were the rheumatism restriction runes that he had absorbed. Fat Cat had said before that if Nie Tian wanted to kill Sima Lianzhao, he would have to rely on the rheumatism restriction runes. Bang! Boom! In the next moment, the shadow of the azure dragon fell and directly smashed into the barrier. After a muffled sound, a terrifying force surged and turned into a ripple of light in the air, instantly surging. Bang! 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 Wherever the ripples of light passed, the destructive power destroyed everything. The azure dragon's shadow was directly shattered. This! Sima Lianzhao was taken aback by the sudden turn of events, and he exclaimed in shock as he tried to retreat. Unfortunately, it was too late. Bang! Sima Lianzhao didn't have time to react. His body was covered by the ripple of light. After a slight tremble, he exploded in the air. The dignified Azure Dragon's sect leader didn't even have time to scream before he turned into a bloody light and disappeared. The next moment, the ripple of light became visible to the naked eye and dissipated into the air. The sudden turn of events caused everyone's faces to freeze. Countless eyes glazed over, as if they had fallen into a dream. Azure Dragon's sect leader, Sima Lianzhao, a peak paramount god, a famous expert in the burial cloud mountains, had died just like that. No one could accept what had just happened, and they were completely petrified. The entire scene fell into a deathly silence. Chapter 2199. Nie Tian stood high up in the sky, his eyes slightly trembling. After a long time, he couldn't help but smile. The power of the rheumatism restriction rune was too strong, far beyond his expectations. When Sima Lianzhao and Ouyang Chuan were fighting before, Fat Cat told Nie Tian that the power of the rheumatism restriction rune was enough to injure Sima Lianzhao in an instant. Then, Nie Tian would add another sword strike to kill Sima Lianzhao. But now, the power of the rheumatism restriction rune was beyond imagination. Sima Lianzhao was killed without Nie Tian even having to do anything. In the origin fetus space, Fat Cat's mouth was wide open, but no sound came out. Obviously, he had also underestimated the power of the rheumatism restriction rune. Fat, why is the power of the restriction rune so strong? Nie Tian finally reacted and couldn't help but ask. I didn't expect it either. Fat Cat shook its head, and its eyes suddenly flickered. It seems that the value of the rheumatism jade is greater than I expected. The rheumatism restriction rune was used to protect the rheumatism jade. The stronger the power of the restriction rune, the more precious the rheumatism jade was. At this moment, Fat Cat felt that it was a bit reluctant to give the rheumatism jade to Ouyang Chuan. Fat, the rheumatism jade is an agreement between Lord Ouyang and me. Nie Tian knew what Fat Cat was thinking. He smiled faintly, and then his eyes flickered with a strange light. I'm just taking it for him. But the power of the restriction rune is also terrifying. It's almost comparable to the attack of a half-saint. Doesn't that mean that I can fight against a half-saint with the power of the restriction rune? Hearing Nie Tian's words, Fat Cat couldn't help but smile bitterly. Nie Tian, you're thinking too much. I only absorbed the rheumatism restriction rune, but didn't fuse with it. The restriction rune has been used up. I don't have the power of the rheumatism restriction rune anymore. Hearing Fat Cat's words, Nie Tian's face stiffened. He was speechless. He had thought that the flowing flame restriction rune could be used at any time, but who knew that it could only be used once? But even if it was just once, it was enough to shock. At this moment, everyone's dumbfounded expression was enough to show how shocked they were. Nie Tian's eyes swept over everyone before finally locking onto Ouyang Chuan. Taking out the flowing flame jade, he took a step forward and said, Sect Master Ouyang, this is what you wanted. Feeling a burning power, Ouyang Chuan's stiff face instantly reacted. He took out the rheumatism jade and took a step forward, saying, Sect Leader Ouyang, this is what you wanted. Feeling a burning power, Ouyang Chuan's stiff face instantly reacted. His eyes lit up and he reached out to catch the rheumatism jade. The rheumatism jade. It really is the rheumatism jade. Feeling the rheumatism jade's aura, Ouyang Chuan was so excited that he couldn't control himself and shouted like a madman. Nie Tian frowned and laughed in his heart. Isn't it just a fire attribute jade? Is there a need to be so excited? Little did he know that the rheumatism jade held a special meaning for Ouyang Chuan. With the rheumatism jade, not only could Ouyang Chuan escape the torture of the seven evils, but he could also use the power within the rheumatism jade to advance to the half-sage realm. Nie Tian, I estimate that if this guy can completely absorb the power of the rheumatism jade, he can at least advance to the half-sage realm, or even stronger. Fat Cat laughed and said to Nie Tian. Nie Tian's eyes flickered. No wonder Ouyang Chuan was so happy. But Nie Tian didn't feel the pinch. He was a man of his word. The rheumatism jade was a trade item. It should have been given to Ouyang Chuan. Ouyang Chuan did almost die in Sima Lianzhao's hands. Just based on this, he deserved the rheumatism jade. With a faint smile, Nie Tian said, Sect Master Ouyang, I've done what you asked me to do. Now it's time for me to do my own thing. With that, he turned around and fixed his gaze on the 17th cave on the 5th floor. Next, he was going to look for the space-time crystal element. After finding the space-time crystal element, he would deal with Linchen. Nie Tian. However, just as Nie Tian turned around, a cold and deep voice sounded behind him, revealing a strong killing intent. Nie Tian frowned. He felt the voice was very familiar. The next moment, he reacted. The corner of his mouth twitched and he shouted a name, Yin Xianyue. Suddenly turning around, a green-clothed figure appeared in front of him. It was none other than the eldest princess of the Yingyue Empire, Yin Xianyue. Nie Tian, I've finally found you. Yin Xianyue smiled coldly, her eyes flashing with unconcealable killing intent. Yin Xianyue. At this time, the onlookers suddenly reacted. Their expressions changed slightly as they remembered Yin Xianyue's identity. She's the eldest princess of the Yingyue Empire, Yin Xianyue. Someone exclaimed, his eyes wide open. The Yingyue Empire was considered a top force in the entire abandoned land, so the eldest princess, Yin Xianyue, was also very famous. No one expected that the famous eldest princess of the Yingyue Empire would appear here. And looking at Yin Xianyue's posture, it was obvious that she was here for Nie Tian. Could there be some enmity between Princess Yin Xianyue and this silver-haired boy? The crowd guessed in their hearts, their eyes shining, obviously looking forward to a more exciting show. It should be easy to find me. At this time, Nie Tian looked at Yin Xianyue, smiled faintly, and said with an extremely provocative look in his eyes, Eldest Princess Yin, it seems that the lesson last time was not deep enough. Did you come all the way here to let me teach you another lesson? Nie Tian, what are you being so arrogant for? Yin Xianyue was ridiculed and provoked by Nie Tian, and suddenly became furious. She roared, and her eyes seemed to want to eat Nie Tian. Oh, I forgot to ask you, does your face still hurt? Nie Tian sneered, and the ridicule in his eyes became more obvious. Nie Tian, you. Yin Xianyue heard Nie Tian's words, and suddenly her chest trembled, and her whole body swayed. She felt a lump of stuffiness in her throat that she couldn't swallow or spit out. It was very uncomfortable. How could she forget that Nie Tian had slapped her more than a dozen times in a row, and her pretty face became like a pig's head? She would never forget this humiliation. It was precisely because of this that she traveled thousands of miles to hunt down Nie Tian. Those dozen slaps were like steel needles piercing her heart, making her feel heartache all the time. If she couldn't kill Nie Tian, the steel needles in Yin Xianyue's heart would never be pulled out. Nie Tian's words, "Does your face still hurt?" simply tore open Yin Xianyue's scar, making her become manic and about to go crazy at any time. Stand down. At this moment, a gloomy voice suddenly sounded in the void, and then a black shadow flashed. Chapter 2200. Nie Tian frowned when he saw a black-robed man suddenly appear. His eyes locked onto the latter. It was an extremely handsome young man. His facial features were extremely exquisite, more exquisite than most women's. However, his eyes were cold and dark. They were like the night sky, causing his entire being to emit an extremely gloomy aura. At this moment, Fat Cat's surprised voice sounded in Nye Tian's consciousness. A night elf. A night elf? Nye Tian's eyes narrowed when he heard this name, and his expression changed. He did not expect that the man who appeared in front of him was a night elf. No wonder this man's appearance was so exquisite. It turned out that he was not a human, but an elf. Nye Tian had long known that the night elves were in the Forsaken Land, but he did not expect to meet a night elf here. After knowing the other party's identity, he could not help but activate the holographic divine glyphs to sense the other party's aura more carefully. This night elf should be around 10,000 years old, but his strength was already in the late Supreme God stage. Moreover, his aura was very powerful, stronger than the average peak Supreme God stage martial artist. He was obviously a genius. Seventh Prince. At this moment, Yin Xianwei glanced at the black-robed man beside him, and instantly calmed down. He bowed slightly in a respectful manner. Nye Tian could not help but frown when he heard how Yin Xianwei addressed the black-robed man, and his expression became even gloomier. This night elf status was obviously not low. He was actually a prince. The black-robed man was called Yi Chenxiang, the seventh prince of the Dying Night Empire. Very few people had heard of the Dying Night Empire. It was a super-empire hidden in the dark. The Inue Empire was only a vassal force of the Dying Night Empire. This was why Yin Xianwei was so respectful to Yi Chenxiang. "You're Nye Tian?" Yi Chenxiang's eyes flickered slightly. He was obviously observing Nye Tian, and then he smiled coldly and said, "I didn't expect your strength to be only at the peak of the Overgod stage." "What? Are you looking down on peak Overgods?" Nye Tian smiled faintly, his expression very calm. "Humph." Yi Chenxiang laughed strangely and said, "If I'm not wrong, the power that killed Sect Master Blue Dragon just now wasn't yours, right? Sect Master Tsang Long is dead. He died by my hand." The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and he said with a faint smile, "As for whether or not I'm using my own power, is that important? What a sharp tongue." The corner of Yi Chenxiang's mouth rose, and he said in a deep voice, "Looks like this prince's trip was not in vain. I've indeed met an interesting opponent." "An interesting opponent?" Nye Tian laughed and asked coldly, "You must be mistaken. When did I say that I wanted to be your opponent?" Yi Chenxiang's gaze trembled. She clearly hadn't expected Nye Tian to say such a thing. However, in the next moment, he smiled and his expression darkened. "Whether or not you are my opponent is not up to you to decide. It's up to me to decide." Another arrogant idiot. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth twitched, and his eyes were full of disdain. Yi Chenxiang's talent was not bad, but his IQ was not up to standard. Generally speaking, people who showed off their arrogance unscrupulously were not very smart. "Since you're willing to accompany Yin Xianwei all the way here, it seems that the relationship between the two of you is not ordinary," Nye Tian said with a smile. Yi Chenxiang had always called Yin Xianwei Yu Er, which meant that the relationship between the two of them was not simple. This made Nye Tian a little curious. "Yu Er is my woman," Yi Chenxiang replied coldly, and his eyes darkened. "You heard her. As her man, of course I have to seek revenge." "Your woman?" Nye Tian couldn't help but laugh when he heard this answer. He said coldly, "It seems that Yin Xianwei framed Gale Xiao Xiao back then because of you. Yin Xianwei used to be Gale Xiao Zhao's fiancé, and the two of them were almost married. However, Yin Xianwei still framed Gale Xiao Xiao in the end, which undoubtedly meant that she already had a better candidate in mind. Now that Yi Chenxiang had taken the initiative to admit that he was Yin Xianwei's man, it was clear that Yin Xianwei had given up on Gale Xiao Xiao because of him. "Gale Xiao Xiao?" The corner of Yi Qinxiang's mouth twitched when he heard this name, and he said coldly, "In my eyes, the Gale clan is like an ant. With a word from me, the Gale clan will completely disappear from this abandoned land. You're comparing Gale Xiao to me. That's an insult to me. Let me put it this way. I'm a dragon, and the Gale Xiao you speak of is just a loach in a stinky ditch. Isn't it normal for you heir to choose me?" After saying that, Yi Qinxiang raised her eyebrows very high, looking at Nie Tian with a condescending attitude, extremely arrogant. "Is that so?" Upon hearing Yi Qinxiang's words, Nie Tian's expression slowly darkened. He said, "But in my eyes, you're not a flood dragon from the 9th heaven, and Gale Little isn't a loach in a stinking ditch. You're stronger than Gale Xiao now because you're a night elf, the 7th prince. Without these identities, you might not be stronger than Gale Xiao. In Xianwei gave up on Gale Xiao and chose you not because she had high standards, but because she was blind." At the end of his words, the coldness in Nie Tian's eyes was very obvious. Gale Xiao was his friend, so how could he be insulted by Yi Qinxiang? "Nie Tian, you're too arrogant." As soon as Nie Tian's voice faded, Yin Jianyue let out a shrill roar and said coldly, "Do you know who the person standing in front of you is?" The words blind were not only mocking Yin Xianyue, but also Yi Qinxiang. In Nie Tian's opinion, Gale Xiao was 100 times stronger than Yi Qinxiang. Back then, Gale Xiao went from being the #1 genius of the Gale clan to a disgrace in the eyes of his clansmen. This drastic change from heaven to hell did not defeat him. His courage alone was very strong. On the other hand, Yi Qinxiang was just an arrogant idiot. If the same thing happened to him, he probably would not even have the courage to live. "Yin Xianyue, do you think I care about his identity?" Nie Tianling laughed, the corners of his mouth raised provocatively. He did not take Yi Qinxiang seriously at all. He did not care about Yi Qinxiang's identity. As long as the latter dared to make a move, he would not show mercy. "Very well." Suddenly Yi Qinxiang's voice sounded. The two words seemed to be squeezed out from the gaps of his teeth. A pair of cold eyes stared at Nie Tian, and he said in a deep voice, "Nie Tian, since you don't take this prince seriously, then you can go to hell." The corner of Yi Qinxiang's eyes twitched, and he suddenly roared, "Come out!" Chapter 2201. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes and couldn't help but look at the dozen figures behind Yi Qinxiang. These black-robed cultivators wore Azura masks, and their auras were powerful and brimming with killing intent. They're all late-stage paramount gods. Very good. Nie Tian's mouth twitched as he scanned them with his divine sense. The people behind Yi Qinxiang were all late-stage paramount gods, which meant that they were abiding by the rules of the game. However, Nie Tian could sense that these Azura warriors were far more powerful than ordinary late paramount gods. Each and every one of them possessed battle prowess that rivaled that of a peak paramount god. "Nie Tian, I heard that you're the Azura king of the Dark Azura field," Yi Qinxiang said with a cold laugh. Suddenly, Yi Qinxiang sneered and said, "The 13 martial artists in front of you were once Azura kings. I'd like to see just how strong an Azura king like you is." Nie Tian's expression flickered when he heard Yi Qinxiang's words. No wonder these Azura cultivators' auras were so strong. They used to be Azura kings of the Dark Azura field. Nie Tian had challenged an Azura king before, so he naturally knew how difficult it was to obtain that title. Those who could become Azura kings were martial arts geniuses that were 1 in a million. It seemed that Yi Qinxiang was not only arrogant, but also cautious. He didn't dare to attack Nie Tian directly, so he sent out the 13 Azura kings to test Nie Tian's battle prowess first. After all, Nie Tian had just killed the sect master of the Blue Dragon sect. Yi Qinxiang might be arrogant, but he knew his own limit. He knew that he wasn't as strong as sect master Blue Dragon. He guessed that the power that Nie Tian had used to kill sect master Blue Dragon wasn't his own strength. However, he couldn't test Yi Qinxiang himself, so he sent out the 13 Azura kings first. Impudent! However, right at that moment, a furious roar echoed out as a figure appeared beside Nietian. It was none other than the sect master of the Divine Winds sect, Ouyang Chuan. Nietian's gaze swept over Ouyang Chuan. The latter's aura had already stabilized, and the injuries on his body had more or less recovered. Just now, after Ouyang Chuan had obtained the rheumatism jade, he had secretly absorbed the power of rheumatism. The 7 evils' cold power in his body was suppressed, so his strength had almost recovered. At this moment, when he saw someone trying to kill Nietian, he naturally wouldn't stand idly by. He saw limitless potential in Nietian. His intuition told him that befriending Nietian was a wise decision. Nietian is this sect master's friend. How dare you guys try to kill him in front of this sect master? Ouyang Chuan's cold gaze swept across Yi Qinxiang and the others. He said solemnly, "Do you think I'm just a decoration? Oh, a strong one has come out." When Yi Qinxiang saw Ouyang Chuan, she frowned slightly, but her expression was extremely disdainful. Divine Wind sect master, right? Do you know who this princess is? Yin Xianyue's voice sounded, revealing undisguised contempt. You're the eldest princess of the Yingyue Empire, Yin Xianyue. Ouyang Chuan smiled cold. This sect master knows that your Yingyue Empire is a top force in the abandoned land. But this is the Burial Cloud Mountain Range. Although the Yingyue Empire is strong, it can't control this place. Ouyang Chuan certainly knew who Yin Xianyue was, and he was very clear about the Yingyue Empire's strength. But he felt that it was worth it to offend the Yingyue Empire for Nietian. The Yingyue Empire's sphere of influence could not touch the Burial Cloud Mountain Range at all. Ouyang Chuan believed that as long as he did not kill Yin Xianyue and the others, the Yingyue Empire would not make an enemy of him. He only wanted to save Nietian, and would not really make a move against Yin Xianyue and the others. Divine Wind sect master, it seems that you want to intervene in this matter. Yin Xianyue's beautiful eyes trembled as she spoke in a cold tone. The threat was very obvious. No need to talk nonsense with him. At this moment, Yi Qinxiang suddenly sneered and took a step forward. She stared coldly at Ouyang Chuan and said in a deep voice, "I'll give you one word. Get lost." Ouyang Chuan's gaze slightly tightened. Obviously, he did not expect Yi Qinxiang to be so arrogant. Sect Master Ouyang. Ouyang Chuan was about to speak, but was stopped by Nietian, who said, "This matter has nothing to do with you. You don't need to intervene." Ouyang Chuan was stunned for a moment and looked at Nietian with a puzzled expression. He did not expect the latter to suddenly say that. "You can leave." Nietian did not explain anything but said cold. Ouyang Chuan looked at Nietian with a puzzled expression. Feeling the firmness in the latter's eyes, he thought for a moment and moved to the side. Nietian saw Ouyang Chuan retreat and felt a lot more at ease. Ouyang Chuan did not know the situation Nietian was facing, so the latter did not want him to get involved in this game. Most importantly, Nietian could see that Yi Qinxiang's status was indeed very high. If Ouyang Chuan angered Yi Qinxiang, it would bring a calamity to the Divine Wind sect. Nietian appreciated Ouyang Chuan's good intentions, but this battle in front of him could only be resolved by himself. Outsiders could not interfere. Very good. Yi Qinxiang faintly smiled and said darkly, "Now, let the show begin." Nietian also smiled and locked his gaze on the 13 Azura kings. He said in a loud voice, "I also want to see just how strong the 13 Azura kings are." Yi Qinxiang seemed to be unable to stand Nietian's insolence and roared, her eyes flashing with killing intent, "Do it!" In the next moment, the 13 Azura kings moved together. Their auras merged into one, boundless and mighty, turning into rolling waves that pressed down on Nietian. Nietian felt a terrifying power pressing down on him. Suddenly, his entire body rose up with a soaring sword momentum. Boom! In the air, the two auras collided, and with a loud boom, Nyetian was forced to retreat. After all, his opponents were more than 10 late paramount gods, and they were all very talented. Their combined auras were terrifying. Nyetian could sense that the combined auras of the 13 Azura kings were strong enough to contend with Sect Lord Blue Dragon. Yichen was taken aback as she looked at Nyetian. This kid's strength is indeed strange. He had never imagined that Nyetian's aura would be able to stand up to the 13 Azura kings at the same time. When the 13 Azura kings attacked together, even he would find it difficult to deal with them, but Nyetian seemed to be able to deal with them with ease. It was obvious how strong he was. The crowd's eyes widened. It seemed that the battle in front of them was even more exciting than they had anticipated. Die! At that moment, the 13 Azura kings let out bellows at the same time. Immediately afterwards, they sprang into action, unleashing countless violent attacks towards Nyetian. Danger! In the blink of an eye, Nyetian sensed danger. Black magical symbols flickered around him, and his aura skyrocketed. In the next moment, boundless astral power surged out of him. Astral soul armor, astral soul shield, astral soul wings, and astral soul flame appeared at the same time. Chapter 2202. Nyetian hovered there in midair, unleashing his astral heaven-cleaving sword image, which radiated dazzling sword light that shot out 10,000 meters in all directions. In that moment it was as if a star had fallen from the sky, causing the entire sky to shine brightly. So strong! When the crowd saw this, their eyes trembled and they exclaimed in surprise. None of them could ever have guessed that Nyetian, who was only a peek-over god, would be able to unleash such terrifying power. Just what is in this kid's body that can instantly increase his strength by nearly an entire realm? Yichen thought, looking at Nyetian from a distance. She could sense that he was now a late paramount god. It was a completely bizarre sight. If she hadn't seen it with her own eyes, she would never have believed that something so terrifying could exist in the world. Boom! Bam! 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 Right at this moment, the starlight sword shadow was like a huge dragon. The sword light suddenly bloomed, and countless attacks landed on the sword shadow, causing a dull sound. The astral heaven-cleaving sword image finally couldn't hold on any longer, and shattered, sending out waves of sword will and astral power in all directions. Nyetian felt a strong force coming at him. With a flap of his wings, he retreated to 1,000 meters away. But at this time, the 13 Azura kings were actually directly pressing towards him. In a head-on clash, Nyetian was clearly at a disadvantage. A martial artist who can become an Azura king is indeed not simple, Nyetian thought to himself. At the same time, he became even more cautious. Die! Immediately afterwards, the 13 Azura kings let out fierce roars and launched attacks at the same time. Violent power crashed down from the sky towards Nyetian. Nyetian relied on his astral soul wings to move with incredible speed, dodging all of the incoming attacks. Bam! 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 However, the 13 Azura kings worked together seamlessly. Even though Nyetian was incredibly fast, he couldn't dodge all of the attacks, and his astral soul shield was hit in quick succession. Damnation! When Nyetian saw the cracks on his astral soul shield, his expression darkened. The 13 Azura kings were clearly cultivators who had cultivated together, and had a tacit understanding of each other. Die! 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 Grim battle cries echoed out as the 13 Azura kings appeared in front of Nyetian one after another like phantoms. Bam! 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 A series of muffled sounds rang out, and Nyetian staggered backward, completely powerless to fight back. Die! Just at this moment, a low and deep roar rang out. Soon after, a ghostly claw shadow appeared in the sky. Like a mountain, it suddenly descended. Boom! A loud boom echoed out as Nyetian's star soul shield shattered into pieces. Nyetian flew backward, and the wings on his back fluttered to stabilize himself. However, blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and his face was pale. The teamwork of these 13 people is simply too seamless. Nie Tian's eyes narrowed as he looked at the 13 figures not far away from him. His expression was extremely ugly. He hadn't expected the 13 Azura kings to be so powerful. Nie Tian, you've truly amazed this prince, but how long can you last against the 13 Azura kings? Yi Chenxiang looked at Nie Tian from afar, a sinister smile on his lips. At this moment, even he had to admit that Nie Tian was a terrifying, abnormal person. To be able to fight against the 13 Azura kings alone, and still last until now, was truly amazing. But unfortunately, Nie Tian was already at a disadvantage, and it was clear that he was going to lose. Yi Chenxiang knew that once the 13 Azura kings gained an advantage, they would constantly expand it. As far as he was concerned, Nie Tian was dead for sure. The only question he had was how long could Nie Tian hold on? At this time, the fat cat's nervous voice sounded in Nie Tian's divine sense. Nie Tian, these 13 have a very tight coordination. You must kill one of them, or it will be very troublesome. Nie Tian nodded, but his expression was still ugly. Of course, he knew that the 13 Azura kings worked together. He really wanted to kill one of them and destroy their tacit understanding. But now, he was at a complete disadvantage, and had no way to fight back. And even more troublesome was that Nie Tian had already discovered that the 13 Azura kings' auras were constantly rising. It seemed that there was a special connection between the 13, and their auras were fusing with each other, promoting each other, becoming stronger and stronger. The crowd's eyes trembled, as if they were worried about Nie Tian. Of course, they were not worried about Nie Tian's safety. They were just worried that if Nie Tian was killed just like that, this battle would be too boring. Everyone's eyes shone brightly, anticipating Nie Tian's counterattack. Unparalleled Shadow, Azura Reverse Kill. At this time, one of the Azura warriors suddenly roared, and the 13 Azura kings moved at the same time. Suddenly, thousands of Azuras appeared in the air. Seeing this, Nie Tian frowned, and his expression darkened. It was obvious that the 13 Azura kings were going to use a killing move. Nie Tian, it's time to end the game. Yi Chenxiang looked at the thousands of Azuras in the air, and the corners of her mouth twitched. Her eyes became extremely cold, as if Nie Tian was already a corpse. Nie Tian, are you finally going to die? Yin Xianyue's eyes were blazing, and his chest heaved up and down. He could not wait to see the scene of Nie Tian being killed. Kill. Kill, kill. Kill, kill, kill. In the next moment, a fierce roar sounded in the air, followed by countless echoes. The entire area was filled with Azura figures, and a dark aura enveloped everything. The Azura figures were like sharp arrows that covered the sky, covering the earth and sky, as they charged towards Nie Tian. Starry Sky Restriction, Open! At this time, the corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched slightly, and the power of stars surged out of his body. The Starry Sky Restriction was instantly activated. Then, his body shook, and several sword chi burst out of his body. Blood chi surged in the air, and the sword intent became bloody and violent. High God Sword Formation, activate! A low roar sounded again, and array runes appeared outside Nie Tian's body, fusing with the sword intent and blood chi. At the same time, his body surged with violent star soul flames. At this moment, Nie Tian's entire body seemed to have become a sword shadow burning with flames. What is this kid trying to do? Yi Chenxiang looked at Nie Tian, and her eyes trembled, and she exclaimed in her heart. It seemed that Nie Tian did not choose to escape this time, but to fight the 13 Azura kings head-on. Fighting against the unparalleled shadow of the 13 Azura kings, this kid is courting death. Yi Chenxiang immediately saw through Nie Tian's plan, and she immediately roared, her eyes filled with killing intent. At this moment, Nie Tian was about to fight the 13 Azura kings head-on. He could already feel that the 13 Azura King's aura was constantly growing stronger, and if he continued to dodge, he would only become more and more passive. Rather than that, he might as well give it his all. Chapter 2203. The forbidden astral space was activated. Nietion's aura surged again. At the same time, the power of the stars around him surged. He was in an extremely violent state. "It's you." In the next moment, Nietion's eyes narrowed as he locked onto an Azura. In the forbidden astral space, his perception had increased significantly. He could easily distinguish which Azura were real and which were illusions. At this moment, he locked onto the real body of an Azura. He wanted to kill this person. At that very moment, thousands of Azura phantoms charged towards Nietion at the same time, stirring up raging waves in the void. Facing the tyrannical killing move of the 13 Azura Kings, Nietion did not dodge. The wings on his back shook, and his figure turned into a beam of light as he attacked. High God Sword Formation, God Punisher. In midair, the corners of Nietion's mouth twitched slightly. His eyes surged with the strongest killing intent. Crazy! This brat is simply crazy! Yi Qinxiang saw this scene from the side, her eyes trembling uncontrollably, and she actually cried out in horror. Nietion was courting death by charging straight into the midst of thousands of Azuras. With so many Azura phantoms, the attack power they could unleash was simply unimaginable. However, at this moment, Nietion disregarded everything. His eyes were resolute as he stabbed out with the starry heaven slash. A blood-colored sword shadow whizzed out like a wild beast. The moment it bloomed, the heavens and the earth became solemn, and the space was pulled taut. Bang! 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 In the next moment, countless Azura illusions fell and bombarded the astral soul armor that surrounded Nietion. In the forbidden astral space, the power of the astral soul armor was strengthened to a certain extent. However, it clearly could not withstand so many Azura attacks. In just the blink of an eye, the astral soul armor cracked and collapsed. Immediately afterwards, numerous Azura phantoms landed on Nietion's fleshly body like sharp arrows. Nietion's figure was attacked, but he did not care. The killing intent in his eyes increased. No! Right at this moment, the Azura King that Nietion's gaze had locked onto finally sensed danger, and it actually cried out in alarm. At this moment, he felt the aura of death approaching. The fear in his heart was magnified infinitely through his eyes. He wanted to escape, but it was too late. Boom! In the void, the crimson sword shadow suddenly fell, and like a mountain crashing down, it bombarded the Azura King. The latter did not even have the time to let out a final scream before he was directly drowned by the sword shadow. For this strike, Nietion used the strongest sword formation in the AO sword tactics, sword formation of Soaring God. At the same time, he had also activated the Star River flight restriction. Coupled with the sword intent that was ignited by his blood chi, its power was unimaginable. The instant the sword shadow fell, the Azura King died a miserable death and turned into a bloody light. Bang! 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 However, at this moment, more Azura figures rushed over, and a terrifying force fell on Nietion's body. His figure swayed like a broken leaf in a storm, so helpless. In front of him, blood was spurting out and his blood chi was burning. His entire body was torn open, and one could even vaguely see his white bones. Such serious injuries, if it were on someone else, they would have long lost consciousness. However, Nietion's heart was tough, and his martial body was far more powerful than ordinary people. At this moment, he still maintained his consciousness, and his eyes were firm. One by one, the Azura figures bombarded Nietion's body like sharp arrows. On his body, more and more wounds were torn open, but his figure still stood there. Although he was swaying, he refused to fall. Countless eyes looked at Nietion in shock. They could not imagine how a martial artist could still stand after suffering such serious injuries. Moments later, all the Azura phantoms in the air disappeared. The dozen or so Azura kings hovered in the air, staring at Nye Tian in shock. They seemed to have forgotten that one of their companions was missing. He's not dead, Yi Chenxiang said, looking over at Nye Tian. He could see that Nye Tian was bathed in blood, and yet he was still standing there. Furthermore, his aura was calm and steady, without any signs of disorder. Clearly, Nye Tian was seriously injured, but he wasn't dead. How could his martial body be so strong? Yi Chenxiang thought, his eyes trembling. Never could he have guessed that Nye Tian's martial body would be this strong. If that many Azura figures had landed on him, he would have long since been reduced to nothing more than a corpse. Yi Chenxiang was a peak paramount god. However, Nye Tian's true strength was only that of a peak over god. Freak! Yi Chenxiang thought, his eyes flickering with killing intent. This kid is a freak. Nye Tian's strength was beyond imagination, and he couldn't keep his cool. He could sense an intense threat from Nye Tian. Right now, Nye Tian only had the strength of a peak chief god. If he became a paramount god in the future, wouldn't he be able to contend against a sage? Thinking of this, Yi Chenxiang's charming face suddenly froze. She made up her mind. No matter what, no matter the price, she must kill Nye Tian. Is this all the 13 Azura kings are capable of? At that moment, Nye Tian stood high up in the sky and let out a furious roar, his eyes bloodshot and filled with a strong desire to fight. His entire body was covered with bloody wounds, and there wasn't a single part of his body that was intact. He looked like he had just emerged from a river of blood, and he gave off a bloody aura of slaughter. To others, Nye Tian's injuries were so severe that it was a miracle that he was still standing. But Nye Tian knew that his injuries weren't as serious as they seemed. To him, they weren't fatal. As his body had fused with the earth vein source, he possessed sufficient life force. As long as he willed it, he would be able to heal all of his wounds in a matter of minutes. But he didn't plan on doing that. After all, he couldn't just let the blood energy go to waste. Just now, he had risked his life to kill an Azura king. Now that one of the 13 Azura kings was gone, the remaining 12 weren't as terrifying as before. Now it was time for Nye Tian to kill. Is this guy a human or a ghost? The 12 Azura kings finally reacted. One of them let out a cry of horror, and his eyes were filled with terror. These Azura kings had killed countless people, but they had never seen someone as strong as Nye Tian. So you people can be afraid. The corner of Nye Tian's mouth curled up, and his eyes were cold. But this is only the beginning. You'll have to be truly afraid now. With that, Nye Tian's body shook, and the blood aura in his body surged, fusing perfectly with the sword intent around him. Chapter 2204. High up in the sky, Nye Tian's figure stood majestically as he unleashed his aura once again. He was like a huge blood-colored sword that stood erect between the heavens and the earth. Even the surrounding space was filled with an intense bloody aura. Everyone stared at Nye Tian with flabbergasted expressions on their faces, their hearts filled with astonishment. Is this guy still human? His body suffered such a heavy blow, but he can still release such an aura. This person is too terrifying. What kind of power is hidden in his body? Does this kid have an immortal body? The crowd exclaimed in their hearts. Their eyes were trembling. They would never forget the scene in front of them. Earlier, they had been worried that Nye Tian would be killed by the 13 Azura kings. Now it seemed that their worries were unnecessary. Nye Tian's strength and perseverance were beyond their imagination. Next, it was time for Nye Tian. The 12 Azura kings looked at Nye Tian in horror. They were speechless. At this time, the sword aura around Nye Tian became stronger. The sword will in the air became sharper and the surging blood chi became more violent. The blood-red figure shrouded in the sword aura was like the god of slaughter. His cold eyes were devoid of any emotion. Now, enjoy real fear, Nye Tianling said. His cold voice was like a death knell, resounding in the air. The 12 Azura kings suddenly felt the killing intent, which made them feel a bone-piercing chill. Swoosh. Then, Nyetian moved. The starlight heavenly slashed down. The fiend god's sword will bloomed instantly, and the sharp aura was breathtaking. One of the Azura kings didn't have time to react. He was hit by the sword's shadow and disappeared. It was a bloody and tragic scene. Run! The other Azura kings trembled when they saw this. The same thought appeared in their minds at the same time. Facing Nyetian, they were afraid. At this time, they had completely lost the courage to resist. There was only one thought in their minds: run. In an instant, the 11 Azura kings retreated at the same time, fleeing in different directions. Do you think you're worthy of being called the Azura king with such courage? Nyetianling laughed. He certainly wouldn't let these people escape. The wings on his back flapped, and the stench of blood in the air thickened. His silhouette was like a beam of murderous light, sharp and merciless. Bang! 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 The crowd's eyes trembled, and before they could react, they saw clouds of blood mist appearing in the air. Wherever Nyetian went, an Azura king would die a miserable death with every swing of his sword. With his blood and chi boiling, coupled with the eruption of the fiend god's sword intent, the current Nyetian was indeed extremely terrifying. However, this state came at the cost of blood energy and fiend god energy, so it definitely wouldn't last long. If the 12 Azura kings weren't afraid and didn't think about escaping, and instead fought with Nyetian head-on, it would be extremely difficult for Nyetian to kill them. Unfortunately, these people were too cowardly. Bearing the title of Azura king, they completely lost their composure when death approached. There's still one more. In the blink of an eye, Nyetian killed 11 Azura kings. Only one was left, and he fled in panic in the air. A bunch of trash! Just as Nyetian was about to make a move, a cold roar rang out in the air. Then, a streak of black light suddenly appeared and attacked the Azura king. Hua! That Azura king didn't have the slightest reaction. He was directly struck by the black light and died a worse death than his companions. Seeing this, Nyetian frowned and locked his eyes on the person who attacked. The person who suddenly attacked was none other than Yi Qinxiang. That Azura king had just fled in Yi Qinxiang's direction. He definitely wanted her to save him, but he never expected that she would personally kill him. It had to be said that Yi Qinxiang was indeed a ruthless person. When she was angry, she would even kill her own people. Looks like you're going to do it yourself. Nyetian looked at Yi Qinxiang and smiled cold. His eyes revealed deep disdain. Your strength is worthy of this prince's attack. Yi Qinxiang smiled coldly and took a step forward. Black killing intent surged out of her body like flames, instantly enveloping the space within several thousand meters. Suddenly, the entire world became much dimmer. Barrier! Nyetian's eyes darkened. He instantly understood and exclaimed in his heart. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice rang out and reminded Nyetian, Nyetian, you're not his match now. Leave. Nyetian's aura was constantly weakening. His blood chi and demon god power could no longer support his current state. Moreover, his injuries were not light. Even with the protection of the Terra Source, he could not continue fighting. Yi Qinxiang's strength was clearly not something that those Azura kings could compare to. Her aura contained a strange killing intent, as if it could devour everything. If Nyetian was at his peak, he might be able to fight Yi Qinxiang. But now, he was no match for her. Nyetian nodded slightly and suddenly turned around. He looked at the huge mountain of the Thousand Demon Mountain and locked his gaze on the 5th floor's cave number 17. Trying to escape? Yi Qinxiang saw Nyetian's actions and roared. Black killing intent instantly blossomed from her body and enveloped Nyetian. Oh no! Nyetian frowned and his expression suddenly changed. At this moment, a black light suddenly appeared. It seemed to have appeared out of nowhere and directly attacked Nyetian. The black light was like an arrow, cold and murderous. Nie Tian reacted instantly and tilted his body slightly. But he was still a bit too slow. Pooh! The sound of flesh being cut rang out. His shoulder had been pierced. Damn it! Intense pain spread throughout his body. Nie Tian roared. He saw that the wound on his shoulder was actually slowly splitting open. The flesh around it was slowly turning black, as if it was withering. What's going on? Nie Tian's pupils shrank slightly. He could not hide the shock on his face. He had the Terra Source in his body and his life chi was strong. This kind of flesh wound should not be fatal to him. Nie Tian, what you have been hit by is the Yi clan's bloodline power, Dark Night Devour. At this moment Yi Qinxiang's voice rang out, filled with an extremely cold aura. She laughed wildly and said, "Now, enjoy the despair of your life being devoured bit by bit." Dark Night Devour. The Yi clan's bloodline power contained an extremely violent devouring power. Dark Night Devour could directly devour a cultivator's life chi. Those hit by Dark Night Devour would have their life chi devoured bit by bit until they died. What was more terrifying was that Dark Night Devour was an extremely dark power. Very few powers could restrain this kind of dark power. Chapter 2205. As Yi Qinxiang's voice fell, Nie Tian immediately felt a terrifying berserk aura scuttling through his body. It was like a bloodthirsty beast that was actually madly devouring his life force. Damn it! Nie Tian looked down at the wound on his shoulder. It was actually expanding. The flesh around the wound quickly turned black and soon lost all signs of life. Oh no! At the same time, Fat Cat's voice was filled with unconcealable panic as she shouted, "Nie Tian, leave this place first." Nie Tian nodded heavily. Although he had used up a lot of blood chi, he could still persist for a while by relying on the earth vein source in his body. Next, the most important thing was to break Yi Qinxiang's barrier and leave this place. Nie Tian didn't expect Yi Qinxiang's bloodline power to be so tyrannical that it could directly devour life force. His figure moved, wanting to leave, but he was blocked by an invisible force. The space seemed to be solidifying bit by bit. Nie Tian's brow furrowed as his expression flickered. Such powerful ward power! Even if he had a tough mind, he couldn't help but show panic at this moment. If he couldn't even break Yi Qinxiang's barrier, then it was impossible for him to leave. The next moment, Nie Tian's expression darkened. He raised his arm with difficulty and stabbed out with starlight heavenly slash. Bang! The sword's shadow whizzed out and bombarded the barrier. A muffled sound rang out, but it had no effect. Nie Tian used almost all of his strength in this sword strike, even using demonic god power. Unfortunately, he was too weak at the moment. Demonic god power originally had a strong restraining effect on all kinds of barriers, but Nie Tian had used up too much demonic god power just now. Now he couldn't even break the barrier in front of him. Trying to escape? Yi Qinxiang looked at Nie Tian cold from the side with a playful expression. She laughed very arrogantly. Nie Tian, with your current strength, you can't break this prince's Dark Night barrier. This prince is prepared to watch you die slowly, slowly. This prince is very curious. Will a person like you be afraid at the moment of death? Ha ha! At the end of her speech, Yi Qinxiang actually laughed complacently. Obviously, he didn't want to kill Nie Tian right away. Instead, he wanted to torture Nie Tian to death slowly. Almost all of the 13 Azura kings he had brought with him had died at the hands of Nie Tian. If he killed Nie Tian, it would be too easy for him. This damned pervert! Fat Cat let out a strange cry and asked anxiously, Nie Tian, how are you feeling now? I won't die for now. Nie Tian responded in a deep voice. Although he was very stubborn, the life aura in his body was being devoured crazily. At this moment, his entire body was bleeding profusely. The wounds from before had become even more glaring. It was as if his entire body had been cut by countless blades, and his entire body was about to fall apart at any moment. Right now, Nie Tian was almost in a situation of certain death. The loss of life aura made him weaker and weaker. Even his body began to sway. Outside the barrier, the crowd couldn't see what was happening, and could only worry helplessly. But from Yi Qinxiang's arrogant reaction, it seemed that Nie Tian was about to die. Ouyang Chuan watched from afar. His expression was conflicted, hesitating whether he should intervene or not. He had clearly heard the conversation between Nie Tian and Yi Qinxiang just now. Although he didn't know Yi Qinxiang's true identity, he could guess that the latter must be from a super force. Otherwise, Yin Xianhui wouldn't be so respectful in front of him. More importantly, Nie Tian had told him that he wasn't allowed to get involved. Sect leader Ouyang believed this prince. If you dare to intervene, you will definitely regret it. Yi Qinxiang looked at Ouyang Chuan cold. She was very arrogant and said insolently, "The price of intervening in this matter is something you definitely can't afford." Ouyang Chuan's eyes trembled, and his figure involuntarily took a few steps back. Yi Qinxiang's blatant threat made him believe that there was a super force hiding behind the former. "Little friend Nie Tian, my ability is really limited. Whether you can survive or not depends on yourself." Ouyang Chuan sighed in his heart. In the end, he still decided not to intervene. At the same time, inside the dark night barrier, Nie Tian's aura was becoming weaker and weaker. His whole body was swaying, like a small boat in a stormy sea, in imminent danger. "Nie Tian, let the Golden Leo and Pai Xiu come out. The two mythological beasts will join forces and break through the barrier." At the moment of crisis, Fat Cat's eyes suddenly flickered, and she shouted in surprise. "Yes." Nie Tian's expression changed slightly, and he nodded heavily. He almost forgot that among the 9 superbs, there were 2 mythological beasts, the Golden Leo and Pai Xiu. "You two come out. Whether you can break through the dark night barrier depends on you." Nie Tian murmured, and the 9 superbs appeared in his hand. In a ball of space-time light, the figures of 2 giant beasts appeared. "Roar! Roar!" The moment the Golden Leo and the Pai Xiu appeared, they roared at the sky at the same time. Their roars were like thunder, shaking the heaven and earth. Yi Qinxiang suddenly felt that something was wrong. Her eyes suddenly trembled, and then she saw the Golden Leo and the Pai Xiu, and she shouted strangely, "There are 2 beasts beside you." The next moment, her figure moved, and she directly attacked. Although she really wanted to see Nie Tian die with her own eyes, to be safe, it was better to kill Nie Tian first. She felt a strong threat from Nie Tian. If Nie Tian did not die, she would feel like there was a thorn in her back, and she would not be able to eat or sleep in peace. "Xiao Guai, stop her!" Nie Tian vaguely saw Yi Qinxiang's figure approaching, and she directly shouted in a low voice. "Roar!" Xiao Guai, of course, understood Nie Tian's words. With a low roar, its giant body rushed over madly, and the surrounding space was violently pulled. Then, Nie Tian looked at the Golden Leo and said in a deep voice, "Golden Leo, break the bounded shield." The Golden Leo's giant head shook a little, and then the violent power of the golden flame surged around it. Its giant body seemed to be burning, and it turned into a horrible ball of fire. The Golden Leo's 4 hooves galloped, and its momentum shook the heaven and earth, directly colliding with the bounded shield. Boom! With a deafening sound, the whole bounded shield of darkness suddenly shook, and then a dazzling crack appeared. The Golden Leo's body was huge, and it suddenly exerted a great force, which was simply too great. Even the bounded shield of darkness could not bear the impact of such a force. Damn it! Yi Qinxiang suddenly felt that the bounded shield of darkness was about to collapse. She roared and slapped her palm down. A black light rushed over like a giant snake, and actually left a horrible wound on the body of the Pai Xiu, which was dozens of meters long. Roar! The sudden pain made Xiao Guai howl to the sky. However, it was not timid. Its giant body rolled over, and unexpectedly, it pounced on Yi Qinxiang. What a powerful beast! Yi Qinxiang obviously did not expect Xiao Guai to be so terrifying. After a scream, she was forced to retreat. Chapter 2206. The Ward of Darkness is broken. When Ye Tian saw a huge gap in the barrier, his eyes couldn't help but tremble, and he couldn't conceal the joy on his face. Then, he turned around and shouted, "Bab, let's go!" However, Bab's giant body was shaking in the air, as if it was about to fall. "What's going on?" Then, he saw a black wound on little Guai's back, which looked like a blood-colored river that was emitting a pungent, bloody aura. "Oh no!" Seeing this scene, Nye Tian exclaimed in shock. He immediately realized that Bab had been injured by Yi Qinxiang's devouring power. At this moment, Yi Qinxiang's gaze was also trembling. He clearly hadn't expected his dark night enchantment to be broken. "Nye Tian, let's get out of here!" The little fat cat's voice rang out again, reminding Nye Tian. Nye Tian looked at Yi Qinxiang with bloodshot eyes. He wanted to tear Yi Qinxiang into pieces. However, he was too weak and needed to recover. Bab's life was also in danger. "Let's get out of here first." Nye Tian decided to leave this place at once. He activated the 9 superbs by force. A beam of space-time light appeared and enveloped Bab, taking it into the 9 superbs. Golden Centipede, which was full of intelligence, returned to the 9 superbs. Immediately afterwards, Nye Tian summoned the last bit of his strength to activate his star soul wings, and with a loud flap, he flew out of the ward. Yi Qinxiang was far away from Nye Tian. He wanted to help him, but it was too late. He could only watch helplessly as Nye Tian entered the 5th level of the cave, unable to do anything about it. "Damn it! Damn it! Damn it!" Yi Qinxiang was like an enraged beast, her entire body trembling. He didn't expect that Nye Tian could escape under such circumstances. However, in the next moment, the corners of his lips curled into a cold smile as he said in a deep voice, "Nye Tian, I don't believe that you can still survive after my Dark Night devouring power pierced through your body." The Dark Night Devourer was extremely tyrannical, directly devouring life energy. Yi Qinxiang firmly believed that even if Nye Tian escaped, he would definitely die. The devouring power of the dark night around him dissipated, and he stared at a cave with a burning gaze. His eyes were filled with unwillingness. Without seeing Nye Tian's corpse with his own eyes, he still felt a little uneasy. He had a vague feeling that Nye Tian would be an exception. At this moment, he even wanted to rush into the cave, but after some thought, he resisted the urge. He knew his own limitations and knew that with his talent, he would not be able to enter the 5th level of the cave. 7th Prince, is Nye Tian dead? At this time, Yin Xianyue's figure arrived. She didn't know what had happened and asked nervously. The corners of Yi Qinxiang's mouth twitched and she said, "He escaped into the cave." The 5th level of the cave? Yin Xianyue's beautiful eyes trembled violently, and her face was filled with disbelief. She had already seen that Nye Tian was covered in blood and severely injured. Under such circumstances, Yi Qinxiang personally intervened, but Nye Tian still managed to escape. How terrifying was Nye Tian! Don't worry. My dark night devouring power pierced through that kid's body. Even if he enters the cave, he will definitely die. Yi Qinxiang glanced at Yin Xianyue and comforted her. Yin Xianyue's beautiful eyes flickered, obviously doubting Yi Qinxiang's words. Without seeing Nye Tian's corpse with her own eyes, Yin Xianyue was still worried. In her eyes, Nye Tian was a person who was particularly good at creating miracles. Don't worry. If you're worried that the kid is still alive, we can wait." Yi Qinxiang knew what Yin Xianyue was thinking, nodded slightly, and said, "My 5th brother will soon come to the 1,000 Demons Cave. With his talent, entering the 5th level of the cave shouldn't be a problem. When the time comes, I'll let him enter the cave to check whether the kid is still alive." "Okay." Yin Xianyue's pretty face was gloomy, and she could only nod helplessly. She had no other choice now. Her and Yi Qinxiang's talent was not strong enough, so they couldn't enter the 5th level of the cave. At the same time, in the 5th level of the cave number 17, Nie Tian walked along the cave step by step with difficulty, leaving a bloody trail along the way. He came to a slightly more spacious place, and quickly took out 9 Extreme. With a thought, he directly entered it. Xiao Guai. The moment he entered 9 Extreme, Nie Tian screamed. He was afraid that something had happened to Xiao Guai. Roar. But just as his voice died away, a familiar roar sounded. It was Xiao Guai responding to him. Xiao Guai, you. Nie Tian frowned, his eyes trembled, and his whole body stiffened. He saw that the long wound on Xiao Guai's back had stopped bleeding, and was slowly recovering. What was even more strange was that the wound was no longer black, but had regained the color of flesh, apparently recovering to normal. After being stunned for a few seconds, Nie Tian finally reacted and said in horror, How is this possible? The wound on Xiao Guai's back was caused by Yi Qinxiang's dark night devouring power. It was definitely a fatal injury. Moreover, Nie Tian sensed that Xiao Guai's breath of life was rapidly weakening. How could it recover now? The dark night devouring power directly devoured the breath of life. Nie Tian couldn't imagine the weird scene in front of him. Brother Nie Tian, don't worry, Xiao Guai is fine now. At this time, a familiar child's voice sounded in Nie Tian's ears. It was Lin Chen. Lin Chen, it's you. Nie Tian stared at Lin Chen, and his pupils contracted. He immediately realized what had happened. Previously, when Xiao Guai was seriously injured, it was Lin Chen who helped it recover quickly with his blood. Now, it must be Lin Chen's credit that Xiao Guai could recover again. Nie Tian saw that Lin Chen's face was as pale as a piece of paper, which was obviously a symptom of blood loss. Undoubtedly, Lin Chen had saved Xiao Guai with his blood again. Brother Nie Tian, you are injured too. Lin Chen looked at Nie Tian in shock, then he bit his finger, and blood slowly flowed out. My blood has a magical effect. Brother Nie Tian, please have a try. Your blood is too terrifying. Nie Tian finally reacted, then raised his hand, held the blood on Lin Chen's finger, and dripped it onto the wound on his shoulder. At this moment, a strange scene occurred. Nie Tian saw that the black wound on his shoulder began to change color, and soon, it regained the color of flesh. This scene took Nie Tian by surprise. He opened his mouth, but couldn't make a sound. He knew that Lin Chen's blood was terrifying, but he never expected it to be so terrifying that it could suppress the dark night devouring power. Chapter 2207. Nie Tian stared at the wound on his shoulder that was slowly healing. It took him a long while before he realized what had happened. Lin Chen's blood was indeed terrifying. The dark night devourer was the power of the Yi family's bloodline. It was a power that could directly devour life energy. Nie Tian had not expected that it would be suppressed by Lin Chen's blood. After a while, the dark energy on Nie Tian's shoulder faded and the wound began to heal. At this time, Lin Chen still wanted to bite his finger, but was stopped by Nie Tian. Lin Chen, I'm fine now. Nie Tian smiled. The wounds on his body were healing on their own. Lin Chen's face was pale. He had lost a lot of blood. Nie Tian would not take any more of his blood. Most importantly, Nie Tian had the source of the earth in his body. After the dark night devourer disappeared, he only needed to rest for a while, and he would be able to recover. This time, it's all thanks to this little guy. Fat Cat's voice was heard. Her blue eyes could not hide her excitement. It seems that this little guy is more talented than I expected. Lin Chen's blood could suppress the dark night devourer. This was something that even Fat Cat had not expected. Nie Tian nodded and sat down cross-legged. The source of the earth in his body slowly released life energy, and the wounds on his body began to heal. It had to be said that the crisis was resolved in an instant because of Lin Chen. Nietian had the source of the earth in his body. Coupled with the fiend god nascent embryo, even without Lin Chen's blood, he could still suppress the Dark Night Devourer with the power of the fiend god. However, it would take a long time, and he would have to suffer a great deal of pain. Most importantly, Bab was also affected by the Dark Night Devourer. Even though the Pai Xiu was born with a strong body, it could not resist the Dark Night Devourer. Without Lin Chen, the Pai Xiu would not have been able to survive. Half a day later, Nietian stood up again. The wounds on his body had completely healed, but his strength had not fully recovered. Phew! Nietian exhaled a mouthful of turbid air, and a sharp glint appeared in his eyes. Big brother Nietian, the wounds on your body are gone. Lin Chen looked at Nietian, her little face full of surprise. She was obviously shocked by Nietian's strong recovery ability. Nietian smiled, nodded, and said solemnly, Lin Chen, thank you. Lin Chen's face turned slightly red, and her gaze became passionate as she said, Brother Nietian, you will definitely help me find my brother, right? Nietian nodded heavily, his eyes filled with determination. He had already decided to help Lin Chen find his brother. Now that he had received such a huge favor from the other party, there was even more reason for him to refuse. Thank you, big brother Nietian. Lin Chen was so happy that he almost jumped up. However, a hint of worry could be seen on Nietian's face at this moment. He was not worried about how to help Lin Chen find his brother, but worried about Lin Chen's body. Lin Chen was a martial artist with 9 elements as one, and the 9 elemental meridians in his body were sealed by the 9 primordial divine seal. This was a very serious situation. Fat Cat said that if Lin Chen was still unable to open the 9 primordial divine seal after a period of time, he would never be able to awaken his elemental spirit, and would be stuck at the elemental meridian realm for the rest of his life. Lin Chen's talent was too strong. A dragon vein martial artist with 9 elements as one, if he could only be an elemental meridian martial artist, it would be too much of a pity. Is the 9 primordial divine seal really that hard to open? Nietian frowned and sighed in his heart. Nietian, I know what you are thinking. Fat Cat guessed Nietian's thoughts and sighed as well and said, Lin Chen's talent is indeed strong, even compared to you. He is not much inferior. Such a talented little guy, if he is stuck at the elemental meridian realm for the rest of his life, it would really be a pity. Actually, I have been thinking about the 9 primordial divine seal. Perhaps there is something that can help Lin Chen open the seal. At this point, Fat Cat's eyes flickered, and she did not continue speaking. What is it? Nietian heard Fat Cat's words, and his eyes could not help but heat up, and he asked in surprise. Nietian, do you know why it is so difficult to open the 9 primordial divine seal? Fat Cat laughed bitterly, and did not say it directly, but asked a question instead. Nietian shook his head, and his face was full of doubt. He did not know much about seals, but he knew that any seal, even an extremely strong one, was usually very easy to open. However, the opening of the 9 primordial divine seal seemed to be very troublesome, and even Fat Cat found it difficult to open. 9 Yuan divine seal. The greatest difference between this seal and the other seals is that this seal contains 9 different elemental powers. Fat Cat's expression became much more serious, and she said, the 9 elemental powers fuse into one in the 9 primordial divine seal. If you want to open the 9 primordial divine seal, you need something that contains 9 elemental attributes at the same time. This kind of thing is very difficult to find. Sigh. As Fat Cat said this, she could not help but let out a long sigh. Nietian's eyes trembled, and he immediately understood what Fat Cat meant. The 9 primordial divine seal contained 9 elemental attributes, and to open this seal, she needed something that contained 9 elemental attributes at the same time. However, most things in the world only had one attribute, and it was very difficult to find something that contained 2 elemental attributes at the same time, let alone something that contained 9 elemental attributes. Nye Tian could be considered a person who had seen some of the world, but in his memory, there was no item with 9 elemental attributes at all. Fat, you know something about 9 elemental attributes, right? At this moment, Nye Tian's eyes trembled slightly, and he asked a little nervously. Since Fat Cat said so, there should be a target. Yes. Fat Cat nodded and said, in my memory, there is indeed something with 9 elemental attributes, called the 9 Hearts Demonic Lotus. 9 Hearts Demonic Lotus. Hearing this name, Nye Tian frowned slightly, and his eyes couldn't help but tremble. Just this name alone seemed to be very exciting. 9 Hearts Demonic Lotus, 1 lotus with 9 hearts, 9 hearts as one. Fat Cat nodded slightly and said, this is a kind of strange flower. When it grows, it can simultaneously absorb the 9 elemental powers of heaven and earth, nurturing 9 lotus hearts, and then the 9 hearts will fuse into one, condensing into the heart of the demonic lotus. As long as we can find a mature 9 Hearts Demonic Lotus and take its heart, we can help Lin Chun open the 9 primordial divine seal. At this point, Fat Cat's eyes suddenly trembled, and actually became blazing hot and said, more importantly, the 9 lotus leaves of the 9 Hearts Demonic Lotus gather together in the shape of a flower cluster, called the Demonic Lotus 9 Flames. The heart of the Demonic Lotus is where the essence of the 9 Hearts Demonic Lotus lies, and the Demonic Lotus 9 Flames is where its power gathers. If we really find the 9 Hearts Demonic Lotus, the heart of the Demonic Lotus can help Lin Chun open the seal, and the Demonic Lotus 9 Flames can help you advance to the Supreme Realm. Advance to the Supreme Realm. Chapter 2208. Hearing Fat Cat say that the 9 demonic lotus flames of the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus could help him ascend to the paramount realm, Nye Tian's expression changed slightly. He was very tempted. He was currently at the peak of the Over-God realm. One more step and he would be able to step into the paramount realm. For Nye Tian, this small increase in realm was definitely a qualitative leap. The difference between the early paramount god and the peak of the Over-God realm seemed to be only a small difference, but the gap between them was like the difference between heaven and earth. Especially for Nye Tian. As long as he could ascend to the paramount realm, the primal star stone in his body would awaken the power of 900 billion stars. The power of 900 billion stars was all the power of the stars in the Milky Way. If it were all awakened, Nye Tian didn't know what would happen. Therefore, once he ascended to the paramount realm, his martial body was bound to welcome a powerful upgrade. More importantly, after entering the land of the abandoned, Nye Tian had seen a lot of powerful experts, each more monstrous than the last, and each more powerful than the last. This caused him to have a deeper understanding of how weak he was. As long as he could ascend to the paramount realm, at least he wouldn't have to fear people like Yi Chenxiang and Yin Xie. Looks like you're tempted, Nye Tian. Fat Cat couldn't help but laugh when she saw Nye Tian's eyes twinkling. Nye Tian nodded heavily. The 9 Hearts Demon Lotus was a rare treasure of heaven and earth. How could he not be tempted? The temptation of ascending to the paramount realm was too great for him. Little fatty, do you know where to find the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus? Nye Tian's eyes suddenly flickered, and he asked nervously. There must be a reason why Fat Cat suddenly mentioned the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus. Yes. Fat Cat nodded slightly and named a person. That night elf. Nye Tian's eyes flickered violently as he exclaimed, the 7th Prince. You mean he has the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus? The Fat Cat's expression changed slightly, but she shook her head and said, he doesn't have the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus on him, but I can sense its aura on him. What do you mean? Nye Tian frowned, not quite understanding what Fat Cat meant. If Yi Chenxiang didn't have the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus on her, then why would she have the aura of the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus? This sovereign guessed that he must have absorbed the power of the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus. The fat cat laughed and said, "Furthermore, I can sense that the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus he used should be a young flower that has yet to mature. If he had absorbed a matured 9 Hearts Demonic Lotus, his current strength would be far greater than this." Hearing the fat cat's words, Nye Tion's expression couldn't help but change. He suddenly reacted, and the corners of his mouth raised into a smile. He said in a deep voice, "So, Yi Chenxiang should know where to find the 9 Heart Demon Lotus." Since Yi Chenxiang had absorbed the power of the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus, she naturally knew about it. "Yes." The fat cat nodded and said, "Nye Tian, that night elf isn't easy to deal with. It won't be easy for you to find out about the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus from him." "Not easy is good." Nye Tian smiled faintly and said, "I like to do challenging things." Yi Chenxiang had almost killed Nye Tian, so the latter naturally wouldn't let him go. Originally, Nye Tian had planned to settle the score with Yi Chenxiang after he recovered his strength. Now, if he killed Yi Chenxiang and obtained information about the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus, wouldn't it be killing 2 birds with 1 stone? The fat cat looked at Nye Tian's expression and knew that the latter would definitely look for Yi Chenxiang. She couldn't help but laugh bitterly and said, "Nye Tian, it's still too early to think about the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus. Since we've already come to this cave, let's go look for the space-time crystal yuans first." "Yes." Nye Tian nodded and the corners of his mouth raised into a faint smile. "Big brother Nye Tian, what are you thinking about?" Lin Chen saw that Nye Tian was standing in place with his expression constantly changing. He couldn't help but feel a little puzzled and raised his head to ask. "Nothing." Nye Tian patted Lin Chen's little head and smiled faintly. He said in his heart, "Little Lin Chen, you've helped me, so I naturally won't let you down. I must get the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus." If he didn't know about the 9 Hearts Demon Lotus, then it would have been fine. But since he knew about its existence, Nye Tian obviously had to get his hands on it. Next, Nye Tian let Lin Chen stay in the 9 extremities, while he himself came out of the 9 extremities. "Will there be space-time crystal yuans in this cave?" Nye Tian looked at the strange stone walls around him, and muttered with a frown. The news about the space-time crystal yuans came from Ouyang Chuan. Nye Tian believed that the other party definitely wouldn't lie to him. Then, he walked forward along the cave, step by step very carefully. He had already entered the cave once before and knew how dangerous it was. Of course, he was very cautious. Along the way, he avoided several killing arrays. Fortunately, there was Fat Cat, otherwise Nye Tian would have died in the killing arrays. The cave wasn't very long, but Nye Tian walked for a few hours and finally reached the end of the cave. At the end of the cave was a spacious cave with a circumference of a few thousand meters. The space was very spacious. The moment he entered the cave, Nye Tian felt a very mysterious force circulating in the space, as if it came from the space itself. It was invisible and formless, but it was everywhere. What a strange force! He exclaimed in surprise and couldn't help but be more cautious. Next, every step he took was very careful, because he knew that if he took a wrong step, he would be consigned to eternal damnation. Nye Tian activated the holographic sacred glyphs and sensed the surrounding space bit by bit. What surprised him was that there was actually nothing in such a spacious cave. Empty, nothing at all. "What's going on?" Nye Tian frowned, and his expression became even more puzzled. He walked along the cave, and there were no forks along the way. There was only one path. Now that he came to the end of the cave, he still didn't find anything. Didn't this mean that the cave was empty? But Ouyang Chuan had clearly told him that there were space-time crystal essences in the cave. Just as Nye Tian was puzzled, Fat Cat's voice sounded and calmed him down. "Nye Tian, don't be anxious, carefully sense the force in the space." Nye Tian nodded, then took a deep breath and calmed down. He walked step by step, slowly approaching the center of the cave. He could clearly feel that the mysterious force in the space was getting stronger and stronger, even causing him a certain amount of pressure. This force was very strange, as if it was coming from all directions, giving people a feeling of helplessness. Stop! Just as Nyetian was about to reach the center of the cave, Fat Cat's voice suddenly sounded. It was a scream, scaring Nyetian so much that he froze on the spot. Fat, what's wrong? Nyetian's eyes trembled slightly, and he asked in confusion. Nyetian, it's right in front of you, 5 meters away, Fat Cat said in a deep voice. His voice was very strange, and there was a trace of excitement in it. Nyetian frowned, and his expression became even more puzzled. Because there was nothing in front of him. He couldn't see anything, and he couldn't sense anything. Use the chaotic flame, Fat Cat said again, his fat face rippling with unconcealable excitement. Nyetian nodded slightly, and a chaotic flame surged on his palm. He gently pushed it out, and suddenly, the chaotic flame was like a tentacle, probing in the air. The next moment, a strange scene happened. Chapter 2209. Huh! Nyetian's expression changed when he saw the flame of chaos vanish into thin air. He was horrified. This was something that he had never expected. Lil, Fatty, what's going on? After a few seconds, he came back to his senses and asked in shock. Hee, it really is the space-time crystal element. However, the Fat Cat did not answer his question. Instead, it laughed strangely and said, "Continue to use the flame of chaos. I want to see how big the appetite of this space-time crystal element is." Nyetian was stunned. He was even more puzzled, but he still followed the Fat Cat's instructions and continued to release the flame of chaos. Next, a strange scene continued to play out. The flame of chaos probed in the air and then disappeared instantly. There seemed to be a monster hidden in the void that could devour the flame of chaos. This made Nyetian feel very shocked. The flame of chaos was formed by the fusion of the first demon fire, the universe boundary, and the second demon fire, the heart of nothingness. It contained the power of creation and destruction. Although Nyetian's control over the flame of chaos was very weak, the power of the flame of chaos itself was already very terrifying. What was hidden in the air that could devour the flame of chaos? Just as Nyetian was feeling bewildered, an even more bizarre scene occurred. Bang! The void suddenly trembled, as if a huge heart was beating. In the blink of an eye, Nyetian felt an invisible force spreading out and spreading through the air. Boom! The huge cave was hit by this force and shook violently as if it was about to collapse. Nyetian was shocked and instinctively retreated. Nyetian, don't be nervous. The thing you want is about to appear. However, the Fat Cat was very calm and even proud at this moment. Nyetian's expression stiffened. He stared at the void in front of him with a burning gaze, as if he was waiting for something. Boom! In the next moment, the surrounding space shook again, and then a white ball of light appeared. What a strong space-time aura! In an instant, Nyetian felt a vast and boundless space-time aura, which gave him the illusion that there was a boundless ocean in front of him. He stared at the ball of white light without blinking. The space was filled with a vast space-time aura, but this aura was very gentle and didn't give Nyetian any pressure. Is this the space-time crystal essence? Nyetian stared at the white ball of light and sensed the space-time aura within it with an intoxicated expression. Although the sphere of light was only the size of a fist, Nyetian could sense that the space-time energy contained within it was boundless and boundless. Boom! At this moment, the white ball of light suddenly shook, and then suddenly expanded, instantly expanding dozens of times. Nyetian reacted quickly and immediately retreated, almost touching the ball of light. A moment later, the white ball of light expanded to a radius of a few meters and finally stopped. Seeing this, Nyetian couldn't help but raise the corner of his lip. He moved his feet and wanted to touch the ball of light. However, at this moment, the white ball of light suddenly spun, and a colorful halo immediately surged in the air, instantly filling the entire cave. In an instant, the originally bare cave was actually covered in colorful light. The gentle and bright light flowed in the air, giving people a feeling of extreme beauty. Nie Tian looked at the colorful space and felt that it was unreal, as if he was in a dream. However, the colorful halo didn't last long and was quickly absorbed by the white ball of light. Then, the white ball of light began to shrink continuously. In the blink of an eye, it had shrunk back to its original size, which was only the size of a fist. Nie Tian watched from the side and didn't dare to be careless, nor did he dare to go forward and touch it. He felt a very terrifying space-time aura in the white ball of light. If the space-time power exploded into a space-time storm, it would be enough to kill him instantly. Nie Tian, pick up the space-time crystal. Let's go. At this moment, Fat Cat's voice was heard, and it said with a chuckle. Nie Tian was stunned and couldn't react for a long time. He suspected that he had heard wrongly. Fat Cat asked him to pick up the space-time crystal directly. Was it really okay? Don't worry. When you used the chaotic flame just now, it has already swallowed the violent power of the space-time crystal. Now, this space-time crystal is no longer a threat to you, Fat said with a chuckle, seeing that Nie Tian was stunned. Of course, he knew what the latter was worried about. Fat, what's going on? Nie Tian reacted, took a step forward, and held the space-time crystal in his hand. However, he felt that it was very strange because it was too easy to obtain the space-time crystal. The space-time crystal is used to stabilize space-time. It contains a very large amount of space-time power, but it is very gentle. Fat Cat laughed and explained, when you used the space-time chaotic flame just now, it was instantly absorbed by the space-time crystal. Although you didn't feel anything just now, the violent power in the space-time crystal has already been swallowed by the chaotic flame. This. Nie Tian was stunned. Obviously, he didn't expect the chaotic flame to be so powerful. What he saw just now was the chaotic flame being swallowed, but what actually happened was that the chaotic flame was swallowing the violent power in the space-time crystal. The chaotic flame is formed by the fusion of two supreme flames. It contains the power of creation and destruction, so it is not strange for it to control a piece of space-time crystal. Fat Cat chuckled and said, "Let me tell you, you know nothing about the chaotic flame now. If your strength can reach the Sage Realm, you will know that the power of the chaotic flame is far more terrifying than you can imagine." Nie Tian swallowed his saliva. He had indeed underestimated the power of the chaotic flame. How could the supreme flame, formed by the fusion of the boundary of the universe and the heart of nothingness, be so simple? But in any case, the space-time crystal was already in his hands, which made Nie Tian very happy. One less thing was weighing on his mind. Then, Nie Tian put away the space-time crystal and left directly. After a while, he came to the entrance of the cave. He looked outside the cave and found that Yi Chenxiang and Yin Xie were still there. Nie Tian, it seems that these two guys are worried about you. They are worried that you are not dead and are waiting for you outside. Fat Cat laughed and said with a strange look in her eyes. Seventh Prince, Yin Xie, should I feel honored that you have such strong killing intent towards me? The corners of Nie Tian's mouth curled up. His gaze locked onto Yi Chenxiang. What was revealed in his eyes was not fear, but an undisguised blazing desire. Yi Chenxiang did not leave, which was exactly what Nie Tian wanted. Previously, Fat Cat had said that he sensed the aura of the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus on Yi Chenxiang. Originally, Nie Tian was still worried that Yi Chenxiang and Yin Xie had already left, and it would be very troublesome to find them. Chapter 22:10. Outside Thousand Demon Mountain, the figures of Yi Chenxiang and Yin Xianyue stood high in the sky, their eyes fixed on a cave. That kid has been in the cave for almost a day, and there has been no movement until now. He must be dead inside. Yi Qianxiang frowned slightly, seemingly a little impatient from waiting, and said in a deep voice. She and Yin Xianwei waited outside the cave for almost a day, and could not help but feel a little annoyed. They could not see the situation inside the cave, and could not enter the cave, so they could only wait outside. Yin Xianwei was very persistent and said with a vicious look in his eyes, "That kid is very strange. Until we see his body we can only assume that he is still alive." When Yi Qianxiang heard Yin Xianwei's words, his eyes narrowed, obviously a little unhappy. He accompanied Yin Xianwei here this time to kill Nie Tian. But now, Nie Tian's life or death was unknown, and his 13 Azura kings were also lost. He was in a bad mood, and Yin Xianwei firmly believed that Nie Tian was still alive, which made him even more annoyed. Are we going to keep waiting?" Yi Qianxiang's eyes turned slightly cold, obviously unable to wait any longer. "Seventh Prince, you have to be patient." Yin Xianwei's beautiful eyes flickered, and she comforted. "His Royal Highness the 5th Prince will be here soon anyway, we might as well wait here for a while." Yi Qianxiang frowned even more, but seeing Yin Xianwei's very persistent look, she could only nod. "Why, are you too impatient while waiting for me?" At this moment, a familiar voice suddenly came from the cave, resounding in the void, seemingly extremely playful. "Nie Tian." Hearing this voice, Yi Qianxiang and Yin Xianwei were stunned at the same time, and their expressions changed. They heard very clearly that this voice was definitely Nie Tian's. "He is not dead." Yi Qianxiang instantly reacted, and screamed, her face as ugly as it could be. "This guy is really still alive." Yin Xianwei's expression was even more exaggerated, extreme hatred twisted her delicate facial features, and her pretty face revealed a hideous look. Although she had a feeling that Nie Tian might still be alive, she couldn't help it. But when this intuition was confirmed, it was still so shocking. At this time, Ouyang Chuan and the others had already left, but there were still many people around. When the crowd heard Nie Tian's voice again, the shock in their hearts was written all over their faces. They didn't expect Nie Tian to still be alive. Nie Tian had killed the 13 Azuras and fought Yi Qianxiang with his blood-soaked body. In this sort of situation, he had entered the cave injured, and yet he was still alive. This was too unbelievable. Impossible. This is absolutely impossible. Suddenly, Yi Qianxiang roared like a mad beast. "He was hit by my Dark Knight Devourer, how can he still be alive? He should be dead. He should have been killed by the devouring power of the Dark Knight." Yi Qianxiang was on the verge of going crazy. She was extremely furious. "Seventh Prince, do you think the power of your bloodline is very strong?" At this time, provocative laughter came from the cave. It was Nie Tian's voice. "In my opinion, your Dark Knight Devour power is trash, not worth mentioning at all." Undisguised sarcasm, every word was like a steel needle, piercing Yi Qianxiang's heart, causing him to fall into an even more frenzied state. "Nie Tian, you are too arrogant. If you have the guts, then come out and fight this prince to the death." Yi Qianxiang roared violently, his eyes became bloodshot, and his body trembled non-stop. "Seventh Prince, he is angering you, you have to calm down." Yin Xianwei saw Yi Qianxiang's rage, stepped forward, and said heavily, "Calm down." Yi Qianxiang suddenly looked at Yin Xianwei, suddenly raised his hand, and slapped it down. Slap! Without warning, a crisp slap sounded, and Yin Xianwei suddenly felt a burning pain on half of his face. "Seventh Prince, you." Yin Xianwei looked at Yi Qianxiang dumbfoundedly, apparently not expecting the latter to slap her in front of so many people. "Yin Xianwei, you stupid woman, it is because of you that this prince came back here. It is because of you that this prince's 13 Azura kings died tragically, and it is because of you that this prince was humiliated by this brat." Yi Qianxiang's eyes turned cold, and she roared violently, as if she wanted to kill Yin Xianwei. Yin Xianwei's eyes suddenly trembled, she couldn't believe the moment in front of her, and her eyes became moist. How could she have imagined that the seventh prince, who was usually gentle and considerate to her, would slap her in front of so many people? This slap was even louder than the dozens of slaps that Nietian had given her. When Nietian slapped her, there were only a few people present. And now there were hundreds of thousands of eyes watching. Xianyue was the eldest princess of the Yue Empire. This slap was not only a slap to her face, but also a humiliation to the Yue Empire. Xianyue, are you not convinced? At this time, Yi Chenxiang seemed to have endured for a long time, and looked at Xianyue with, do you believe that this prince can kill you right now? You want to kill me? Xianyue's eyes trembled violently, and her eyes were filled with doubt, confusion, and even horror. She said in a trembling voice, "Why?" Just now, Yi Chenxiang was very calm, but in an instant she became like this. This was unacceptable to Xianyue. Xianyue, do you think you are very important to this prince? Yi Chenxiang sneered and said directly, to tell you the truth, to this prince you are just a plaything. This prince can spoil you, and I can also kill you at any time. Your Yue Empire is just a vassal force of our dead Knight Empire. You can't be so naive to think that accompanying this prince for a few nights can make you a princess of the dead Knight Empire, can you? This prince has long wanted to say these words, but in order to play with you for a while longer, I have been holding back. Look at you, so frightened, don't you feel excited? Ha ha. At the end, Yi Chenxiang laughed wildly, and her state was very strange, as if she was crazy. Yi Chenxiang only had a momentary liking for Xianyue, but his patience was limited. When the 13 Azura kings died tragically, he was already very angry. Now that he suddenly found that Nietian was still alive, he couldn't accept it for a while, and the anger in his heart suddenly erupted like a volcano. He couldn't threaten Nietian, so he could only find Xianyue to vent his anger on. Seventh prince, are you speaking the truth? Xianyue froze in place, and her beautiful eyes slowly welled up with tears, and her expression was almost desperate. Chapter 22:11. Yi Chenxiang looked at Xianyue coldly, as if the other party was a toy that she had abandoned. Xianyue's eyes trembled as he looked at Yi Chenxiang in disbelief. He couldn't believe that the person in front of him was the man who had been with her day and night. The crowd looked at the scene in the air with a completely dumbfounded expression, not knowing what was going on. Seventh prince, you're really a man. Humiliating your own woman in front of so many people, you're really bold. At this moment, an extremely mocking voice resounded through the sky, and it was filled with an extremely provocative tone. Yi Chenxiang suddenly turned around, and his eyes suddenly trembled. A figure stood behind him. It was Nietian. The words just now were said by Nietian. The provocation in the words was like a slap to Yi Chenxiang's face. Brat, how dare you come out? Yi Chenxiang growled. His whole person was furious like a wild beast, and his eyes were sharp and murderous. He never thought that Nietian would dare to come out of the cave. What shocked him even more was that Nietian's current state had completely recovered, and his aura was vigorous and vigorous. But just a day ago, Nietian was seriously injured, and his body was pierced by his devourer of the night. How could such a serious injury recover in such a short time? Are you surprised? Nietian knew what Yi Chenxiang was thinking, and said with a cold smile, but compared to you, I'm more surprised. Just a day ago you said that Xianyue was your woman. But now you can actually kick her away like a foot-binding cloth. This boldness is really in line with your identity as the seventh prince. Seventh prince, you're really a man with guts. I, Nietian, admire you. The words of admiration were filled with mockery, but more than that, it was an undisguised humiliation. Yi Chenxiang's actions made Nietian despise her. Even if he hated Xianyue very much, he still felt uncomfortable seeing the scene in front of him. But it must be said that Xianyue's current situation was completely caused by her. She was the one who gave up on Gale Xiao Xiao and chose this man who treated her as a plaything. Therefore, she had to accept the consequences herself. "Nie Tian, I didn't think you would dare to come out. Since that's the case, I'll kill you with my own hands." Yi Chenxiang ignored Nie Tian's mockery. She had a gloomy expression on her face. She took a step forward and the dark night devouring power gushed out from her body. The surrounding space instantly darkened and was filled with an extremely dense Yin aura. Another spirit formation? Seeing this scene, Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, but the corners of his mouth rose into a disdainful smile. Using the same move on him twice, Yi Chenxiang really underestimated Nie Tian. Die. At that moment, Yi Chenxiang's fierce roar echoed out. Immediately afterwards, a streak of black light shot out towards Nie Tian like a black arrow, whistling through the air. Nie Tian felt a terrifying devouring power coming towards him, but he smiled faintly. He instantly activated the 3 forbidden techniques. Star soul wings appeared on his back, and with a light tap of his feet, he perfectly avoided the black light. Huh! Yi Chenxiang was surprised. Obviously, she did not expect Nie Tian's speed to be so fast. How is this possible? You're not suppressed in the dark night formation? In the next moment, Yi Chenxiang reacted and suddenly exclaimed. She was even more surprised in her heart. The most terrifying thing about the Dark Night formation was that it was condensed with the Dark Night devouring power, constantly suppressing the opponent's strength and devouring the opponent's life aura. But strangely, it seemed that Nie Tian was not affected at all in the Dark Night formation. To Yi Chenxiang, this was simply impossible. "Seventh Prince, I've already said that your bloodline power is too weak. To me, it's like nothing." Nie Tianling laughed. The sword aura around him surged violently, as if a sword god had descended. "Arrogant! You're too arrogant!" Yi Chenxiang was instantly enraged. Suddenly, her body shook, and a pair of dark night wings condensed from the dark night devouring power appeared on her back. The dark night wings instantly spread out. It was actually 1,000 meters long, like 2 pieces of black cloth that covered the sky. Instantly, the surrounding space sank into deeper darkness. The gazes of the crowd trembled, and their expressions were filled with shock. At this moment, they could no longer see the shadows of Nie Tian and Yi Chenxiang. They could only see the sky full of black aura, as if night had descended, enveloping the entire area. Dark night wings, ultimate wing kill. Just at this moment, a cold voice resounded in the darkness. Boom! In the void, the dark night wings instantly closed. On the tip of the wings, a sharp black light whizzed out. Like a giant black snake, it attacked towards Nie Tian. Nie Tian could feel the boundless black aura gathering and pressing down on him. He could not help but narrow his eyes. In the next moment, he no longer hesitated. The blood qi in his body instantly ignited. Under the stimulation of the blood qi, the sword aura around him became even more violent and violent. The sword aura surged, the sword aura was dense, the blood qi flew, and the sword aura was dazzling. Proud sword technique, heaven destroying 3 swords, the final 3rd move. Heaven destroying 1 sword, blood devours the heavens. In the boundless sword aura, Nie Tian's voice resounded, like the death god's knell, resounding in the darkness. Starry heaven suddenly fell. Boundless sword aura condensed in an instant. In the void, a 3,000-meter-long sword shadow appeared. The sword aura surged for thousands of meters, like a startling rainbow across the night sky. Boom! The sword shadow was like a dragon, surging and rolling. The blood-red light was boiling non-stop. Outside of it, there was also a black power surging. It was the divine demon power. Nie Tian used all his strength in this sword. It could be said to be his strongest sword. When the 3 forbidden skills were activated, burning the blood qi, using the strongest forbidden sword, and the divine demon sword aura, the power of this sword was unimaginable. Bang! In the instant that the sword shadow rolled, The dark night boundary in the air could not bear the pressure of the sword aura and directly collapsed. In midair, the sharp black light also weakened a little. What's going on? Yi Qinxiang instantly felt a terrifying pressure appear. He could not help but tremble, and his expression became terrified. He simply couldn't believe that Nie Tian was able to unleash such a terrifying sword strike before his eyes. His dark night boundary could not even bear the pressure of this sword aura. Boom! At this moment, high up in the sky, the divine demon sword aura and the black light collided. The void suddenly shook. Then, the black light directly collapsed. The divine demon sword aura was like a roaring dragon, directly pouncing towards Yi Qinxiang. No! Yi Qinxiang screamed. He wanted to escape, but it was already too late. In just an instant, the divine demon sword aura fell from the sky. Yi Qinxiang's figure was directly submerged in the mighty sword shadow. Everyone's eyes trembled. The moment the barrier was broken, they clearly saw this scene. Chapter 22:12. Everyone's eyes were focused on the silver-haired figure high up in the sky. The shock in their hearts was perfectly written on their faces. They simply could not imagine that Nie Tian could burst out such a terrifying sword attack in an instant. Yin Xianyue's whole face was stiff as she watched from the side. The shock in her heart was indescribable. Not long ago, she had fought with Nie Tian. At that time, the latter's strength was far less terrifying than it was now. But at this moment, Nie Tian's strength almost crushed Yi Qinxiang. One sword attack, just one sword attack, and Nie Tian completely defeated Yi Qinxiang. After a long time, the sword intent in the sky dissipated, and a blood-red figure appeared, standing there shakily, as if he would fall at any time. This figure was none other than Yi Qinxiang. At this moment, his whole body was dripping with blood, as if he had just walked out of a blood pool. He looked at Nie Tian in horror, no longer arrogant, only horror and fear. He never dreamed that he would be defeated by Nie Tian with one sword attack. Not dead yet, a warrior with the power of bloodline has a strong martial body. Nie Tian looked at Yi Qinxiang, the corners of his mouth slightly raised, and his eyes revealed a playful smile. In the sword attack just now, he used almost all the Godfiend power in his body. The Godfiend's sword essence combined with 5 sword intents erupted with unimaginable power. The Godfiend power was originally the power of darkness, and it stood at the pinnacle of darkness. It had a fatal suppression on all dark attribute powers. It was precisely because of this that Nie Tian's sword attack could directly injure Yi Qinxiang. It had to be said that Yi Qinxiang's martial body was really strong enough. She was hit head-on by the sword shadow, but still did not die. Yi Qinxiang did not die, which was not a bad thing for Nie Tian, but a good thing, because Nie Tian still had some questions to ask Yi Qinxiang at the moment. The corners of his mouth pulled up into a cold smile. His figure moved, and directly came to a position less than 10 meters away from Yi Qinxiang, staring at the latter with a strange look. Yi Qinxiang looked at Nie Tian with incomparable shock. Being stared at by the latter made her whole body shiver. She said with a trembling voice, What do you want? What for?" Nie Tianling laughed and asked, "Seventh Prince, you wanted to kill me just now, and now you've been seriously injured by my sword. What do you think I should do as the victor?" "You!" Yi Qinxiang felt the killing intent in Nie Tian's eyes, and couldn't help but gulp. Her teeth were chattering non-stop as she said, You want to kill me?" At this moment, Yi Qinxiang felt like she was a little lamb waiting to be slaughtered at any time. As for Nie Tian, he was like a butcher. With a steel knife in his hand, he could easily kill him at any time. "Seventh Prince, I still remember something you said to me." Nie Tian faintly smiled. "When my body is pierced by the devouring darkness, tell me to enjoy the despair of having my life devoured. I really want to ask you now, do you feel despair in the face of death? Do you enjoy this feeling?" His voice wasn't loud, but it was like a clap of thunder that struck Yi Qinxiang's ears. The latter subconsciously retreated, and the horror in his eyes showed that he didn't enjoy this feeling. Nye Lord Nye. Yi Qinxiang panicked and was almost incoherent. He said, I was wrong, I beg you, don't kill me. As long as you don't kill me, I'll do anything. The current Yi Qinxiang was no longer as arrogant as before. He wanted to kneel in front of Nye Tian and kowtow to admit his mistake. He was very regretful. Back then, he had the chance to kill Nye Tian directly, but he thought of slowly torturing Nye Tian to death. However, at this moment, the situation of the two had been reversed. Now, Nye Tian was the one who controlled life and death. You'll do anything, really? Nye Tian's eyes flashed with a strange light. He faintly smiled, and his face was playful. Yes. Yi Qinxiang nodded his head like a rattledrum. He suddenly looked at Yin Xianyue and said loudly, It's her, it's this stupid woman. She missed you. Lord Nye Tian, as long as you don't kill me, I'll help you kill her and destroy the Yingyue Empire. How about it? His eyes flickered with a fiery light, as if he saw the hope of survival. Yin Xianyue stood not far away, looking at Yi Qinxiang with a dull face. He didn't expect the latter to be so cowardly. Nye Tian looked at Yi Qinxiang and couldn't help but shake his head. He had seen people who were afraid of death, but it was really rare to see someone as afraid of death as Yi Qinxiang. Yin Xianyue, suddenly, Nye Tian's gaze swept towards Yin Xianyue, and he said coldly, Is this the person you chose? You gave up Gale Xiao for this scum. It seems that what I said before was not wrong at all. You, Yin Xianyue, are a blind man. The cold voice was filled with disdain and anger. Yin Xianyue's expression became even more painful when he heard Nye Tian's words. Nye Tian was right. He was indeed blind and actually chose Yi Qinxiang. Yes, Gale Xiao's identity was indeed not worth mentioning compared to Yi Qinxiang, but Gale Xiao was definitely not a coward. If Yin Xianyue hadn't betrayed Gale Xiao, the latter would have died for her. But what about Yi Qinxiang? In order to save her life, she actually wanted to kill Yin Xianyue and destroy the Yingyue Empire. Such a person, if not scum, what was? Yin Xianyue's delicate facial features were twisted together, obviously very remorseful and pained. If she had a chance to choose again, she would definitely choose Gale Xiao, and never Yi Qinxiang. But the reality was that there were no ifs. I really hope that Gale Xiao can see this scene. Nye Tian glanced at Yin Xianyue, sighed, and then fixed his eyes on Yi Qinxiang again. Lord Nye Tian, are you not going to kill me? Yi Qinxiang saw that the killing intent in Nye Tian's eyes had faded a lot, and could not help but ask with joy. Humph. Nye Tianling laughed twice and said directly, Seventh Prince, you said you were a dragon of the ninth heaven, and Gale Xiao was a small loach in a stinking ditch. What about now? Do you still have such a sense of superiority? Yi Qinxiang's expression froze slightly, and then she actually laughed, suddenly raised her hand and slapped her face, saying, Lord Nye Tian, I was wrong. Please don't take it to heart, Lord Nye Tian, and spare my life. Seeing Yi Qinxiang's action, Nye Tian could not help but smile bitterly and shake his head. This Yi Qinxiang, apart from being arrogant, had no other good points, and was simply too stupid. He wanted to kill Nye Tian so much, and now that he failed, he thought that Nye Tian would let him go by saying a few words of apology and slapping himself a few times. How naive. The reason why Nye Tian did not kill him was because he still had something important to ask him. Scum, listen carefully, I have a question for you. Nye Tian's face suddenly darkened and he said coldly, Where did the 9 hearts demonic lotus in your body come from? Chapter 22:13. When Yi Qinxiang suddenly heard Nye Tian mention the 9 hearts demon lotus, he froze on the spot and could not say a word for a long time. He did not expect that Nye Tian actually knew about the 9 hearts demon lotus. How do you know about the 9 hearts demon lotus? Yi Qinxiang was stunned for a few seconds, and finally reacted. Scum, am I asking you a question now, or are you asking me a question? Nie Tian's face darkened, and his eyes revealed a cold murderous intent, shrouding Yi Chenxiang. Yi Chenxiang was shrouded by the murderous intent, and his whole body trembled violently, almost falling down. At this moment, he did not answer Nie Tian's question, but looked at Nie Tian with a strange expression, as if he was looking for something. Scum, you don't have much time left. Nie Tian spoke again, and his voice was extremely cold. Now, answer my question. Yi Chenxiang was frightened by Nie Tian, and he trembled violently. He took a few steps back, shook his head, and said, I can't say it, I can't say it. If I say it, I will definitely die a horrible death. Nie Tian was stunned for a moment and then sneered, Seventh Prince, do you think you still have a choice? If you don't say it, you will die a horrible death now. As soon as he finished speaking, Nie Tian took a step forward, and suddenly a violent sword aura appeared, pressing directly towards Yi Chenxiang. Ah! Yi Chenxiang screamed, and could not bear the pressure of the sword aura at all. His body trembled, and his whole body directly collapsed. This kid, such a ruthless method. The crowd saw this scene, and their eyes trembled violently, and they cried out in their hearts. Nie Tian's strength and talent were far beyond everyone's imagination. They did not expect that his method would be so vicious and extremely cruel. Yin Xia saw Yi Chenxiang collapse like a pile of mud, but there was no panic in her eyes. Instead, she was very excited. She and Yi Chenxiang had already fallen out, so of course she would not worry about the latter's situation. She even hoped that Nie Tian would directly kill Yi Chenxiang. Even though Yi Chenxiang was scum, his status was extremely high. He was the seventh prince of the Dead Knight Empire. The Inui Empire, the Dark Knight Azura Field, and even the Dark Moon Divine Sect were all vassal forces of the Dead Knight Empire. Although very few people in the Forsaken Land knew of the existence of the Dead Knight Empire. However, the Dead Knight Empire was the true peak power in the entire Forsaken Land. I really can't say it. Yi Chenxiang raised her head with difficulty and looked at Nie Tian in horror. She was actually still unwilling to say it. Nie Tian narrowed his eyes and felt very strange. Yi Chenxiang was so afraid of death, yet she didn't even say anything. Could it be that there was some huge secret behind the 9 Hearts demonic lotus? Seventh Prince, you have one last chance to speak. Nie Tian's face suddenly darkened. He said in a cold tone, if you say something I don't want to hear, then you will die. As the word die fell, it was like a 5,000 catty boulder smashing into Yi Chenxiang's heart. He felt his entire body rumble and the whole world go dark. He could see that Nie Tian was really determined to kill at this moment. That stern gaze was definitely not a bluff. If he didn't say anything about the 9 Hearts demonic lotus, Nie Tian would definitely kill him directly. He really couldn't understand. The 9 Hearts demonic lotus was the Yi clan's secret. How did Nie Tian know? Nie Tian had said that he was determined to obtain the 9 Hearts demonic lotus. The 9 Hearts demonic lotus was too important to Nie Tian. This was not only related to whether Lin Chen could activate the 9 primordial divine seal, but also related to the improvement of Nie Tian's own strength. As long as he could obtain the 9 Hearts demonic lotus, he could absorb the power of the demonic lotus 9 flames and ascend to the highest realm. That was a qualitative leap. Nie Tian definitely wouldn't let go of such a great opportunity. I'll speak. Yi Chenxiang's eyes trembled incessantly. He finally raised his head to look at Nie Tian and said with a trembling voice, The 9 Hearts demonic lotus is right behind you. Yi Chenxiang was about to say the information about the 9 Hearts demonic lotus, but at this moment, something strange happened. Shut up! A deep, sinister voice rang out in the sky. Then, the air suddenly trembled, and a streak of black light shot down from the sky towards Nie Tian with murderous intent. What a fierce aura! Nie Tian felt the fierce aura in the void and couldn't help but narrow his eyes and exclaim in his heart. but he reacted quickly. A pair of wings appeared on his back. With a sudden flap, his figure retreated 100 meters away and cleverly avoided the attack of the black light. Another night elf. Nye Tian stabilized his figure and immediately felt that the aura of the black light was clearly the devouring power of the night. Clearly, the person who came was also a night elf like Yi Chenxiang. Fifth brother. At this moment, Yi Chenxiang suddenly raised his head. His originally despairing eyes revealed an unconcealable passion, like a dying person suddenly grasping at straws. Seventh brother, you idiot, why are you here? Then, an angry roar came from the void. It was like rolling thunder with a vast and mighty aura. Fifth brother, save me! Yi Chenxiang couldn't care less at this moment. He struggled to stand up and actually wanted to escape. Escape? Can you escape? At this moment, Nye Tianling laughed and directly stabbed with his sword. Instantly, a murderous sword shadow whizzed out and attacked Yi Chenxiang. Don't kill him! The person in the void in the distance suddenly saw this scene and couldn't help but cry out. He was clearly very flustered. He didn't expect that Nye Tian would actually dare to kill Yi Chenxiang. Yi Chenxiang's figure walked clumsily. Suddenly, he felt a terrifying pressure behind him. He struggled to turn around and opened his mouth, saying, "I'm the seventh prince of the Dead Knight Empire." You can't. He used the last of his strength to finish the last sentence, but he couldn't finish it. The moment the sword's shadow fell, a bloody light appeared in the space. Yi Chenxiang's fate was to die without a corpse left. This. The crowd watched from afar and couldn't help but gasp at the bloody scene. Nye Tian's methods were really too ruthless. He actually dared to kill directly. Although the crowd didn't know Yi Chenxiang's true identity, someone who could loudly reprimand the crown princess of the Inuit Empire couldn't be ordinary. Was Nye Tian not afraid of the force behind him retaliating by killing Yi Chenxiang? On the other side, Yin Xianyue's beautiful eyes trembled when she saw Nye Tian kill Yi Chenxiang with a sword. She shouted in her heart with joy, "Good kill!" This sentence was not only because Yin Xianyue hated Yi Chenxiang. It was also because this sword made Nye Tian and the Dead Knight Empire stand on the absolute opposite side. Nye Tian killed the seventh prince of the Dead Knight Empire, and the people of the Dead Knight Empire definitely wouldn't let it go. This sword made Nye Tian and the Dead Knight Empire form an irreconcilable feud. Bastard! How dare you kill the prince of the Dead Knight Empire? The next moment, a figure in black descended from the sky and stood at the place where Yi Chenxiang died. A pair of cold eyes, like a venomous wolf, stared at Nye Tian. Chapter 22:14. The fifth prince of the dying Night Empire, Yi Chenfeng, hovered in the air, staring at Nye Tian like a venomous wolf in the night. At this moment, Yi Chenfeng's eyes were filled with anger and killing intent as he looked at Nye Tian. He had never imagined that Nye Tian would dare to kill Yi Chenxiang right in front of him. Nye Tian's expression was very calm as he looked at Yi Chenfeng. There was no fear in his eyes, only a hint of playfulness. "You've got some nerve, you brat." Upon seeing Nye Tian's calm demeanor, Yi Chenfeng, who was about to attack him, couldn't help but let out a cold roar. Nye Tian had already scanned Yi Chenfeng with his divine sense, and he was very surprised. Yi Chenfeng was as strong as Yi Chenxiang, a late paramount god. However, his aura was far stronger than Yi Chenxiang's, especially the dark energy that surged around him. It was many times stronger than Yi Chenxiang's. There was no question that Yi Chenfeng's bloodline power was much stronger than Yi Chenxiang's. In some ways, bloodline power represented a cultivator's talent. Therefore, Yi Chenfeng's strength and talent were both far above Yi Chenxiang's. "What's your relationship with the seventh prince I killed? Who are you?" Nye Tian smiled faintly and asked in a very calm manner. His voice was flat, and his expression was calm. At this moment, Nye Tian didn't seem the least bit flustered. Yi Chenfeng stared at Nye Tian and said cold, "I am Yi Chenfeng, the fifth prince of the dying Night Empire." The person you just killed was my seventh brother, Yi Chenxiang. Yi Chenfeng's eyes flashed. You don't know what kind of power the Dying Night Empire is, do you, brat? In his opinion, Nie Tian didn't know about the Dying Night Empire. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dared to kill Yi Chenxiang even if he had 100 gallbladders. After all, Yi Chenxiang was the seventh prince of the Dying Night Empire. Killing Yi Chenxiang was equivalent to forming an irreconcilable enmity with the passing Night Empire. In the entire abandoned land, the number of forces that dared to provoke the passing Night Empire could be counted on one hand. Moreover, they were all hidden great forces. If Nie Tian knew Yi Chenxiang's identity and still wanted to kill her, it would undoubtedly mean that he was a lunatic. So what if you know? So what if I don't know? Nie Tian looked at Yi Chenfeng and sneered in disdain. Then, he insipidly said, Your seventh brother wants to kill me. So, I can't let him live. Yi Chenfeng's eyebrows sank when he heard Nie Tian's words. His expression instantly became gloomy. Nie Tian's attitude was completely unexpected. Boy, what's your name? Yi Chenfeng frowned and asked in a cold tone. Nie Tian replied indifferently. Yi Chenfeng's gaze trembled slightly when he heard the two words Nie Tian. He seemed to have suddenly thought of something. His expression was a little surprised, and he thought to himself, a few days ago, Big Brother mentioned a person to me. I think he's also called Nie Tian. Could it be this boy? The name Nie Tian made Yi Chenfeng think of something. It turned out that a few days ago, his big brother, the crown prince of the passing Night Empire, Yi Chenli, told him that he was going to kill a person called Nie Tian. At that time, Yi Chenfeng was still very curious about who this Nie Tian was to actually make Yi Chenli take action personally. Yi Chenli didn't say much to him at that time. He only said that Nie Tian must die. Yi Chenfeng faintly felt that the Nie Tian in front of him and the Nie Tian that Yi Chenli spoke of were very likely to be the same person. He was very curious about Nie Tian's background, to actually make the crown prince of the passing Night Empire take action personally. But at that moment, he suddenly realized that Nie Tian's strength was actually only at the peak of the overgod level. This discovery made his eyes narrow, and he was extremely shocked. He knew that Yi Chenxiang's strength was at the late overgod level. Coupled with the Yi family's unique bloodline power, the Dark Night Devourer, she could even easily deal with a peak overgod expert. But now Yi Chenxiang had actually died at the hands of a peak overgod expert. How could he not be shocked? Yi Chenfeng's first reaction was that it was impossible, but the next moment, he calmed down a lot and asked in a deep voice, Nie Tian, who exactly are you? Nie Tian's eyes narrowed slightly, and he asked indifferently, Who do you think I am? He could tell that Yi Chenfeng seemed to be somewhat familiar with his name. But Yi Chenfeng's current reaction was a little strange. It was as if he wasn't here to kill Nie Tian, but for something else. I don't care who you are, but you killed a prince of the passing Night Empire. The only ending for you is death. Yi Chenfeng growled and he took a step forward. The dark aura around his body instantly surged, turning into a surging pressure that enveloped Nie Tian. The corners of Nie Tian's mouth twitched. His whole body surged with sword momentum, and he easily broke Yi Chenfeng's imposing aura. Then, he said with a cold smile, Fifth Prince, do you think you can kill me with just your imposing aura? Should I say that you're too naive, or that you're too stupid? Kid, you're too arrogant. Yi Chenfeng frowned and he roared, You've angered me. With that, Yi Chenfeng no longer hesitated. He moved, turning into a ray of black light, and a black storm appeared in the surrounding space. It was like a huge beast of darkness, and it pounced at Nie Tian. What a terrifying aura! The crowd, who were tens of thousands of meters away, suddenly felt a suffocating pressure. They immediately screamed and retreated. Yin Xianwei, who was watching coldly from the sidelines, couldn't help but have her beautiful eyes flicker. She was very surprised and thought to herself, This fifth prince's battle prowess is several times stronger than Yi Qinxiang's. Nie Tian is definitely no match for him. In midair, Nie Tian felt Yi Qinfeng's aura, and his eyes darkened. He was shocked. He knew that Yi Qinfeng was stronger than Yi Qinxiang, but he didn't expect him to be so much stronger. Both Yi Qinxiang and Yi Qinfeng were late-stage paramount gods, but the former's strength was equivalent to a peak paramount god, while the latter's strength was close to the peak of the god state. Nie Tian estimated that Yi Qinfeng's strength was definitely not weaker than Mizuhara's. In an instant, he reacted, and the three forbidden skills were activated again. His aura surged, and he slashed out with the starlight heavenly slash. At the same time, the starlight wings on his back flapped, and his figure instantly retreated. Yi Qinfeng's aura was too strong. If they fought head-on, Nie Tian would suffer a great loss. Nie Tian had just killed Yi Qinxiang, and he had almost exhausted the godfiend power in his body, so his current strength was greatly reduced. It would be too stupid to fight head-on with Yi Qinfeng under such circumstances. Therefore, he chose to attack instead of defend, and avoided a head-on confrontation. Kaboom! In the next moment, a thunderous sound was heard, and the sword shadow collapsed under the impact of the black storm. The boundless devouring power of the night swept over like a raging wave. Chapter 22:15. Bang! A muffled sound came from the void as Nie Tian's figure was sent flying hundreds of meters away. He steadied his body, and stared at Yi Qinfeng with shining eyes. Yi Qinfeng's strength had exceeded Nie Tian's expectations. He was much stronger than Yi Qinxiang. To kill Yi Qinxiang, Nie Tian had already unleashed his full power. It was too much for him to face an expert like Yi Qinfeng now. Not dead. Yi Qinfeng's voice sounded in the darkness. He seemed a little surprised. Originally, he had assumed that his Dark Night Tempest would be enough to kill Nie Tian. Who would have thought that Nie Tian's reaction speed would be so terrifying? What surprised him even more was that Nie Tian's martial body did not seem to be afraid of the Dark Night devouring power. This was really strange. The Dark Night devouring power was a bloodline power that directly devoured the breath of life. What kind of power was hidden in Nie Tian's body that he was not afraid of the Dark Night devouring power? Yi Qinfeng did not know that Nie Tian had already been hit by the Dark Night devouring power once. Nie Tian's martial body was very strong and adaptable. It was much easier for him to face the Dark Night devouring power. This person's combat strength is really terrifying. I can't continue to tangle with him, Nie Tian thought to himself. He could not help but glance at the Thousand Demons cave behind him. If there was no other choice, he was prepared to enter a cave and hide temporarily. However, he could still hold on. Although it was unlikely that he could kill Yi Qinfeng, he still had the ability to protect himself. Most importantly, he still had a huge question in his mind. It was the 9 Hearts demonic lotus. Nie Tian, the 5th prince's body, also has the aura of the 9 Hearts demonic lotus. Fat Cat guessed what Nie Tian was thinking and reminded him. Nie Tian nodded slightly. The corners of his mouth twitched. He looked at Yi Qinfeng provocatively and said, Yi Qinfeng, the Yi clan's bloodline power is only SOSO. Compared to the Dark Night devouring power, I am more interested in the 9 Hearts demonic lotus in your body. 9 Hearts demon lotus. Yi Qinfeng's pupils shrank as he heard these words. He was very surprised and blurted out, How do you know about the 9 Hearts demon lotus? Nie Tian saw Yi Qinfeng's reaction, and the corners of his mouth slightly raised. He suddenly said, Your Royal Highness, you came here for the 9 Hearts demon lotus, right? You. Yi Qinfeng's face froze, and his eyes were filled with astonishment. Although he didn't finish his words, his expression clearly said, How did you know? Yi Qinfeng hadn't come to the Thousand Devils Cave to kill Nie Tian. Instead, he had come for the 9 Cores demon lotus. In reality, he didn't know that his 7th brother, Yi Qinxiang, had also come here, so when he saw Yi Qinxiang, he was very surprised. The news that he had come to the Thousand Demons Cave was only known to the members of the Yi clan's royal family. However, Nie Tian had directly said that he had come for the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus. This was just too weird. The Nine Hearts Demon Lotus was the Yi clan's biggest secret. No one knew about it, so how did Nie Tian know? Did Old Seven tell you? Yi Qinfeng's eyes flickered and he suddenly asked. He didn't tell me because you stopped him just as he was about to say it. Nie Tian smiled faintly, and the corners of his mouth brimmed with a proud smile. He raised his eyebrows and said, "If I said I guessed it, would you believe me?" Yi Qinfeng's face stiffened, and he immediately roared, "You're lying." The Nine Hearts Demon Lotus was the Yi clan's secret. How could Yi Qinfeng believe that Nie Tian had actually guessed it? "You don't believe me?" Nie Tian laughed and suddenly turned to look at the Thousand Demons Cave behind him. He said, "Your Royal Highness, not only did I guess that you came for the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus, but I also guessed that the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus is in the Thousand Demons Cave, right?" It had to be said that the information that Yi Qinfeng had come for the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus was indeed a wild guess on Nie Tian's part. He didn't expect that he had actually guessed correctly. When Nie Tian mentioned the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus, Yi Qinfeng's reaction was exactly the same as Yi Qinxiang's. In addition, Yi Qinxiang would rather die than say anything about the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus. This further proved that the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus was very important. Yi Qinfeng and Yi Qinxiang both had the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus in their bodies, and the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus wasn't the Yi clan's bloodline power. This was very strange. Therefore, Nie Tian guessed that the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus was very likely a Yi clan secret. Just now, Nie Tian had already seen that Yi Qinfeng hadn't come to kill him. On the contrary, when Yi Qinfeng saw him, he had a very surprised reaction. This meant that Yi Qinfeng had most likely come to the Thousand Devils Cave for another matter. Nie Tian casually guessed in his heart, and for some reason, he thought of the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus. Then, he casually said it, and unexpectedly, he was right. Yi Qinfeng's surprised reaction told Nie Tian that he had come for the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus. After confirming this, Nie Tian thought that the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus was very likely to be in one of the caves in the Thousand Demons Cave. "You!" Yi Qinfeng's face slightly stiffened, and he couldn't say anything. His gaze almost involuntarily shifted, and then he immediately retracted it. However, such a small movement was captured by Nie Tian's keen senses. Fifth floor, cave number 99. Nie Tian's eyes suddenly flickered, and he suddenly said. When Yi Qinfeng heard Nie Tian's words, his eyes suddenly widened, and his expression stiffened. His whole body was petrified, because the cave Nie Tian mentioned was the cave where the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus was. Sure enough, Nie Tian looked at the embarrassed and stiff expression of Yi Qinfeng, and in his heart, he cried out in surprise. He was very sure that the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus was in the fifth floor cave number 99. Just a moment ago, Yi Qinfeng's gaze shifted to the fifth floor cave number 99, and Nie Tian caught this moment, so he understood everything. The Nine Hearts Demon Lotus was the Yi clan's biggest secret. A long time ago, an ancestor of the Yi clan entered the fifth floor cave number 99, and found the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus. From then on, the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus became the Yi clan's biggest secret. The Nine Hearts Demon Lotus absorbed the power of the nine primordial energies of heaven and earth. When a martial artist absorbed the power of the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus, not only could they increase their strength, but they could also increase their martial talent. However, the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus had a very long growth period, and it took 1,000 years for it to bloom. Therefore, every 1,000 years, the members of the Yi clan would enter cave number 99 on the fifth floor. Only a few people could enter the fifth floor cave number 99, so the Yi clan did not set up any protection. They felt that setting up protection would instead attract other people's attention. The Yi clan had kept the secret of the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus for hundreds of thousands of years. Unexpectedly, today, it was actually leaked by Yi Chunfeng in such a strange way. The reason why Yi Chunfeng came to the Thousand Demons Cave this time was to enter the 5th floor cave number 99 and pick the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus. Chapter 22:16. Nia Tian, now that you know the secret of the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus, I can't let you live, Yi Chunfeng said coldly, his eyes surging with killing intent. He still didn't understand that he was the one who leaked the secret of the Nine Hearts Demon Lotus to Nie Tian. Nie Tianling smiled coldly and said, "You want to kill me? I'm afraid you don't have the ability to do so." Arrogant! Yi Chunfeng roared, and then his figure moved. The dark aura around his body suddenly soared again, and an incomparably violent aura filled the air. The space within 10,000 meters was instantly shrouded in darkness. What a strong person! The crowd's eyes trembled as they exclaimed in unison. Yi Chunfeng's aura was really too strong. Even if the crowd was tens of thousands of meters away, they could clearly feel the oppressive aura, making it hard for them to breathe. Boom! 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 At this time, there was a violent roar in the air. Black storms appeared, like giant black snakes, rolling and roaring in the air. The dark aura seemed to want to devour everything. This guy's bloodline power is so strong. Nie Tian couldn't help but frown as he felt the aura in the void. Yi Chunfeng's aura was getting stronger and stronger, and his whole body seemed to be integrated with the darkness. Only black storms could be seen in the air, but Yi Chunfeng's figure was nowhere to be seen. Yi Chunfeng's bloodline power was really strong, no wonder he could enter the 5th layer of the cave. Nie Tian, prepare to die. Then, a fierce roar came from the sky, like a roar from hell, full of strong killing intent. Boom! 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 The next moment, 3 dark storms appeared, shrouding from 3 different directions and surrounding Nie Tian. The dark storms rotated violently in the air, standing upright between heaven and earth, like a dark tyrannosaurus that wanted to devour the whole world. All of a sudden, 3 dark night windstorms appeared and shot towards Nie Tian. In the face of such a strong dark night devouring power, Nie Tian felt the blood and qi in his body become restless, as if it would burst out of his body at any moment. At the critical moment, his silhouette abruptly trembled as the 9 dragon veins in his body revolved frenziedly, stabilizing his blood and qi. At the same time, he activated his astral soul shield as the astral wings on his back shook violently. His silhouette soared up into the skies, resembling a sharp sword that sliced apart the heavens. Around him, the sword momentum surged and was extremely sharp. He actually broke through the impact of the dark night storm and directly leaped tens of thousands of meters into the sky. Trying to escape? Seeing this, Yi Chunfeng sneered and said in a deep voice, "Do you think you can escape from my dark night storm?" Nie Tian's strength was indeed beyond Yi Chunfeng's imagination. However, the latter still had the confidence to kill Nie Tian. His dark night storm was condensed from the dark night devouring power. The kind of devouring power it had towards blood and qi was unimaginable. Nie Tian, you'll soon find out that you're doomed to be a tragedy in front of me. Yi Chunfeng's grim voice faded, and a strange scene took place. Hua, hua, hua. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the void. The 3 dark night storms actually split apart, instantly turning into 9 dark night storms. 1 dark night storm turned into 3, 3 into 9. The aura of the 9 dark night storms did not weaken in the slightest. Instead, it became even more violent. Huh! Seeing this scene, Nie Tian could not help but narrow his eyes. It seemed that the dark night storms were more difficult to deal with than he had expected. Boom! 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 In the next moment, the 9 dark night storms were like 9 wild dragons that soared into the sky and directly rushed towards Nie Tian. Sensing the dark night storm's aura, Nie Tian's expression couldn't help but change. The dark night storms were really too tyrannical. Even if Nye Tian had a martial body, if he was hit head-on, he would at least lose a layer of skin. The wings behind Nye Tian flapped crazily, and the power of the stars in his body continuously gushed out. When the star soul wings were fully spread out, they were actually as large as 1,000 meters. His figure was like a giant bird, flying high in the sky at high speed. And behind him, the 9 dark night storms were closely chasing him, like maggots in a tarsal bone. He could not get rid of them no matter how hard he tried. Stinking brat, this prince wants to see just how fast you are. Yi Chunfeng looked at Nye Tian from afar and his eyes suddenly became cold. He suddenly moved his feet and his whole body turned into a black light, rushing straight towards Nye Tian. Nye Tian flapped his wings with all his might and relied on his speed to deal with the 9 dark night storms. But under such circumstances, the power of the stars in his body was consumed very quickly. Even the power of 800 billion stars would not be able to support him for long. But he absolutely could not stop at this time. Once he stopped, he would be hit by the 9 dark night storms head-on and would be torn to pieces in an instant. And the most troublesome thing was that Nye Tian felt that the power of the stars in his wings was slowly absorbing the power of the dark night storms. The power of the stars was the origin of power and had the power to devour the heavens. Even the devouring power of the dark night could not compete with the power of the stars. The star soul wings devouring the dark night storms was originally a good thing because it was equivalent to enhancing Nye Tian's strength. But the dark night storms contained a terrible devouring power of the dark night, which could devour the breath of life. This was simply fatal for Nye Tian's martial body. Therefore, he had now fallen into a very strange state. His strength was increasing, but his breath of life was weakening. In just a blink of an eye, Nye Tian's face became as pale as a sheet of paper. No, I have to think of a way to destroy the 9 dark night storms. Nye Tian's eyes were filled with determination. If he continued to absorb the energy of the dark night storms, the blood in his body would become extremely violent and there was a high possibility that it would distort time and space. At that time, the worst-case scenario would be Nye Tian self-detonating. Starfire sea incineration. With this thought in mind, Nye Tian stopped in midair, turned around and slashed out with his sword. Instantly, a blazing sword appeared. Like a raging fire dragon, it slashed towards one of the dark night windstorms, wreathed in raging flames. Kaboom! The flaming sword's shadow and the dark night storms collided, and the 2 powerful forces collapsed at the same time. Terrifying waves of qi wreaked havoc in the air. Bang! And at this moment, because Nye Tian's body stopped moving, he was hit by a dark night storm and was directly sent flying. In midair, he flapped his star soul wings and instantly stabilized himself. That was close. Fortunately, his martial body was strong, and coupled with the abnormal recovery ability of the Earth Vein Source, this attack did not cause any fatal injuries to him. But at this time, Nye Tian suddenly felt an extremely sharp aura rushing towards him, causing his heart to tremble. Of the 9 dark night storms, 1 had been destroyed, leaving 8. However, Yi Chunfeng had unexpectedly rushed over at this time. His whole body was like a black lightning bolt, and he was rushing over to attack. Oh no! In an instant, Nye Tian sensed danger. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he quickly reacted by activating the heaven-shrouding totem.